Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this virtual conference, the first of its kind in our time. It's a conference jointly hosted by the regional groups of the Institute of Risk Management from Zimbabwe and South Africa, and we are running with the theme, Weathering the Perfect Storm. We're excited to have attendees from across the region. Thank you for taking time to join this session. We have participants from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, from Botswana, excited to have representatives from Kenya, as well as Lesotho. My name is Joseph Mhlabi. I am an executive committee member of the IRM Zimbabwe Regional Group. I am here to just kick things off, and my co-host is Denise Snell. She's the secretary of the regional group of the Institute of Risk Management in South Africa. We're here to ensure that the program runs smoothly as planned, and we will do our best to ensure that we run this program and are done by 14:30 as planned. We have a packed and exciting program with exciting speakers and a breakaway session where we'll go into different conference rooms. We need to sign in there on time, and also just to ensure that we are back in the main conference on time so that we do not disrupt the flow of proceedings. For purposes of good order, you are muted and only the hosts will give you access as and when necessary. We are happy to take your comments, your questions on the chat. At the appropriate time, we will collate these and raise them on the panel as necessary. For purposes of the breakaway session, if there are any technical glitches, we have Mr. Rory Paul from the IRM UK who will help us navigate any challenges. You will recall from the registration process that there are 4 streams that we can join into. We hope you have selected the stream of your choice. Now, to kickstart our program for the day, I will ask our first host of the day, the chairperson of the IRM Regional Group in South Africa, Ms. Zanele Makubo, to deliver our welcome for the morning. Zanele, over to you.
Thank you very much, Joe. It is a pleasure for us this morning from Zimbabwe and from South Africa. We are so excited. Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to this prestigious event. Honorable chief guests, speakers, and delegates, as have been mentioned by Joe, I'm the chairperson of the Risk Management South Africa Regional Group. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to the first IRM Southern African Conference of 2020. We are grateful to IRM UK, South Africa and Zimbabwe Organizing Committee, the members of the Organizing Committee who have arranged such a beautiful program. I wholeheartedly welcome all the delegates across Southern Africa, Africa, and across the globe. As you all are aware of the current impact of COVID across the world, today we are honored together to discuss the theme, Weathering the Perfect Storm. As you could recall, in 2020, we found our role as risk professionals elevated in assisting organizations to implement business continuity to weather the perfect storm of COVID-19. To map the journey ahead in the next and the new normal, in line with the Development Agenda 2030, the conference seeks to address the role of the risk profession and the collaborative efforts across disciplines on matters of risk. We have lined up of speakers in the program who are uniquely placed to position the profession, debate, discuss, and highlight the key points, risk, trends, and reforms. The Institute of Risk Management UK and IRM professional will highlight the need and benefits of continuous professional development through risk standards, qualification, competency, and membership. It will be great to hear from our keynote speakers about the imperatives of the next normal, reimagining business, as well as the role of risk professionals in the next normal in contributing to the Sustainable Development Agenda. Our panel discussion is packed with collaboration across risk disciplines in relation to disaster management, business continuity, health and well-being, for us to break the silos in the journey ahead. We will zoom into the breakout session to further unpack the development agenda globally by focusing on the global risks such as climate change, economic revitalization, continuity, social and economic issues, and the impact of technology on the risk landscape. That is looking into the 4 IR. Ending with a motivational session, as we know that in our discipline, we work very hard. So we need to take care of ourselves. So we have get that in motivational speaker from our esteemed speaker to take us through how we must take care of oneself so that we can be able to soldier on in the new normal. Thank you all and enjoy the conference. As I sit down, I would like to invite our honorable guest from UK to take us through the update of the IRM UK. Without wasting any time, the name of the esteemed speaker is Ms. Carol Williams, who is the certified member of the IRM UK, a director of corporate relations for the Institute of Corporate Services at the Institute. Her role is to reach out to organizations of all types to start conversation about risk management, competency, and professional standards, and about how the Institute of Risk Management can help them achieve what they want to achieve. With that being said, you are all welcome and thank you very much. Over to you, Caroline.
Right, okay, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me from here, a chilly morning here in the UK. So thank you very much, Zanelli, and thank you very much to all of those who have been concerned with organising the conference here today. We're always very much impressed by the energy and the ability of our members from Africa to be able to bring groups together and to be on top of the issues of the day. And you set a fantastic example for the rest of the world in being able to do that, because IRM is really as strong as its members, and we have such strong members from Africa. And we're always delighted to see you and delighted to participate in what you do. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in organising this today. I'm going to talk and give you a little bit of an overview of what has been going on at IRM this year. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Doug, who's going to go into more detail about the core of what we're doing, the update of our examinations, which are the mark of a true risk professional. So, what's been going on at IRM in 2020? Well, of course, we started 2020 and everything was moving along fine. And then, of course, the COVID pandemic struck. And from an operational point of view, IRM had to put a lot of changes and new plans into place to ensure that our students and our members could maintain what they were doing. The first thing was the examinations. Many of our students have to go to examination centres around the world and sit and take an examination, and that could no longer happen. So our exams team swung into action, and we prepared a plan to transfer many of our certificate students to a later session in the year, which everybody seemed to be quite happy with. Our diploma students, we put in a system where they could take the exams in their own homes and do their essay questions under exam conditions, but at home. And that all went down very well. So the summer exams, we found a way of helping people through that. Now we have coming up the winter exams, and again we have the threat over that of various exam centres being closed depending on where they are in the world. So again, we have plans, we have backup plans, and we have backup plans for our backup plans. And the aim is that our students will get a relatively seamless experience, so that all the hard work they put into studying can actually be turned into a certificate. So going forward, I think our exams team have done an amazing job to try and keep the show on the road and ensure people can carry on learning. Because one of the things about the pandemic is that it's really highlighted the need for organisations and individuals and societies to become much better at risk management. And if we have any spare time at the moment, then investing that time in ourselves and raising our level of qualifications, learning something new is surely a way of getting a good thing coming out of such a bad situation. Our training courses, we're very well known around the world for providing training, which people used to come to our centre in London, and we used to run training courses in everywhere from sort of Dublin to Singapore. Of course, the face-to-face training has had to stop, but our training team have switched our most popular courses to a virtual version, and we've been really quite taken aback by how successful that has been. And the other thing about it is it's become much more inclusive, in that people now don't have to travel to London in order to get our top IRM trainers in front of them. So that's actually worked very well. We're hoping to recommence training in the spring of 2021 if the restrictions allow. But we've really learned quite a lot about how you run virtual training courses on the platforms like Zoom, and how you operate these courses. And we're getting really, really good feedback. So training is continuing. So if you were thinking of doing some IRM training, have a look at the website and see what's running and how you can access it. We've also developed some pure e-learning courses where it's not delivered by a trainer, but you actually run the course on your computer at your own pace as you want to. So that's something, again, that IRM has innovated as a result of a crisis. Our membership, you will have contact with Juliet and Rory and Tamara in our membership team here. That has continued. We've continued to run our groups, which have switched to an online basis, as we're doing today. Again, we found the benefit of becoming much more inclusive. People can join the groups, participate in them without having to travel. So that's been, again, a benefit that we found from the situation. We've had a big membership renewal, and we've found that virtually everybody who is a member of the IRM wants to stay being a member of the IRM, which is, again, really a great vote of confidence in the profession, and something that's taken us cheerfully into the future. So we've also had some thought leadership, some research going on, and here are the highlights of what's been going on here. We were all very excited to receive the baseline survey report from the team in Zimbabwe, working with the National University of Science and Technology there, with our local group there. So thanks very much. I know there's a number of people on the call who've been involved in that. This was our first piece of research coming out of Zimbabwe, indeed out of Africa. So we were really pleased to see that. And we think that's given the group some really good foundations upon which to build up the profession of risk management in Zimbabwe. So you can see this, if you haven't already downloaded your own copy and read it from cover to cover, then you can get that from our website. We also responded and produced some resources in response to the pandemic. A number of our members around the world have written papers or participated in study groups. And we have a page on our website where we've gathered all that together so that members can share with each other the work that they've done to help their organizations through this time. Back in April, we did a survey of our membership to see what the response of the profession to the pandemic has been. And we were really quite, we had nearly 1,000 responses to this, which is way more than we'd usually get for an IRM survey. So I'm going to go through the key results of that just in a minute. But we're also going to update that over the next few weeks. So our members and our contacts will see a request to participate in an update of that survey. So please, it would be great if you could respond to that. The other thing that we've recently released that you might find of interest are some sound practice guidance from the Institute of Operational Risk. Now, the Institute of Operational Risk came into the IRM group last year. As you know, the clue's in the name, they specialise in operational risk, largely within financial services, but also in other organisations where operational risk is an issue. And they have brought with them a number of what they call sound practice guidance documents on a number of topics that their members have produced. And they're going through them and reviewing them and sharing them with all IRM members. So 3 have been released this year so far, and the rest will be coming out over the next few months. So there are 3 on the website on risk culture, embedding an operational risk management framework, and operational risk appetite and tolerance. So again, you can go onto the website and download those, and that can give you some guidance on the very latest thinking on those 3 areas. So moving on to that pandemic risk survey that I was talking about, we asked people, did you actually think about this pandemic risk before it happened? And we actually found that 32% of organisations had not considered pandemic risk or anything similar to it at all. And this is, remember, we are surveying here a population of risk professionals. So that was, you know, from our point of view, that was pretty disappointing. Although thinking through how this might happen, we're pretty sure that the risk professionals had thought about it. The difficult bit is actually getting the organisations to think about it. Anyway, I don't think you're going to have that problem going forward into the future. The problem we may get is one of these biases, the sort of recency bias, in that nobody's going to be able to think about anything else now apart from pandemic risk. So that was quite an interesting finding. So there are, as well as the 32% who hadn't considered it, there was a group, a fairly large number here who had looked at it or something similar. So that was the good news. Okay, so having thought about it, did you actually do anything about it? 1/5 of them didn't. Yeah, just over half of them did some stuff about it, and a third there actually had a full plan of action in place. And how did it go in the first few weeks? Remember, we were asking this back in sort of April, May time. So generally, people were pretty happy. They felt that their business continuity, their response, was pretty good. And we're going to be quite interested to see how people feel about that a few months in. So what have people identified as the biggest short-term impacts? Okay, the biggest thing they said, it's just change. We're having to change things all the time, changing our objectives, changing the way we're working. We're having to deal with that change on top of doing our job. Things are delayed, we're not recruiting, we're being distracted from our key objectives, and in some cases we've actually lost sales. So those were the biggest short-term impacts. But there were a number of things that people didn't really have seen as a problem. They didn't find that they had the communication difficulties they might have expected. Again, because I think we've all pulled in the IT, the technical support. We're using new methods, and things have actually worked pretty well. IT generally was working well, which is good news. So we found that, there were some good things and there were some bad things. So what's been helpful? Again, the big ones here were technology, being good at using IT, remote working, good communications, leadership. People said their personal understanding of risk and uncertainty had been really helpful in getting them through those first few weeks. And I think anybody who watches the news and tries to understand what pandemic actually means, what the risk is personally, business-wise, society-wise, for different groups. If you've got that understanding of risk and uncertainty, you can feel that much more confidence in understanding what's going on. So I won't go through these one by one, but you can see there are 10 things there that are helpful. Strangely enough, these are the sort of things we teach people at IRM. So people who have studied with us and work with us will be that much better for prepared for pandemic or any other risk for that matter. So how is this going to affect us in the future? Where should we be taking our profession? Resilience, you can see some of the keywords I pulled out here. Strategy, complexity, quantification, supply chain, all these big issues, which are the topics that I see our groups looking at again and again. These are areas where the profession is going, where you personally and your organizations are going to have to develop your risk management. And then there's what we might be missing. We've got this big, it's not even an elephant in the room, which, to take a phrase that we use in the UK. It's the pandemic is really overshadowing everything we do, but all these other things are still going on. We're still having to tackle climate change. We're still having to deal with cyber risk. We still have geopolitical risks emerging. We still have supply chain issues. Natural disasters will still happen. We're going to have to deal with all these things against the background both of the current pandemic and the shadow that pandemic and focus on pandemic issues will cast over the coming years. So it's a big challenge, something that we're all going to have to step up to and to help our organizations through. But I think the members of the IRM, the people that we see throughout the world and in Africa who have taken this situation and said, well, I am going to educate myself, I am going to be part of a network which is producing solutions, which is producing confidence, and that will take us forward into the future. So that's where we're coming from the point of IRM centrally. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Doug, who is going to take you down into some of the detail of how we have been working to adapt our qualifications and our the things that we do in order to address that new future. So thank you very much, and handing over now to Doug.
Okay, as we introduce Doug, Doug is our certified fellow for the Institute of Risk Management. He's a specialist, advisor, and a former chief examiner in the United Kingdom. Doug has been an international risk management consultant with over 20 years experience. He has worked in the UK, Africa, Nigeria, Rwanda, and Togo, US, France, Ukraine, Turkey, Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and Israel in many sectors, including retail, banking, telecoms, brewing, power generation and insurance, FMCG, etc. The vast experience he will share with us this morning in relation to what you can benefit in the suites of professional qualification offered by the IRM. Over to you, Doug.
Thank you. Hopefully you can all hear me. Like Carolyn, it's pitch dark here. It's very cold and the wind is at 40 miles an hour, about 60 kilometers an hour, something like that. Not a very nice day, but I'm sure it's much nicer where you are. It's obviously a privilege to be able to speak to you all this morning. I'm very lucky to have worked in Africa on 3 projects in Togo, Rwanda, and Nigeria. So been able to see the diversity there, and I worked with some very good risk professionals in Africa. So the objective really today is just to, I suppose, establish why it's important for anybody to take professional qualifications. And we're also going to look at some of the routes to our qualifications. Because you don't all have to sit exams, particularly if you've been in risk management for over 5 years. I'll talk about that when we get there. So here's the agenda. We're going to look at why you need to study, or we recommend you do a professional qualification, how the IRM matches it for risk management, the routes to getting your IRM certification, some of the specialist qualifications. I'm going to touch on the syllabus that we revised this year, and then very briefly on our new virtual learning environment, and then over to yourselves for some questions. So the 7 reasons. These are not my reasons. These are generally accepted reasons why anybody should take a professional qualification, whether they're in law or risk management or accounting or anything. So the main thing is that you can expand your skill set and keep yourself current. Okay, so you may have joined an organization, you weren't a risk manager when you started, and then all of a sudden someone says, can you become our risk manager? And you do that. And then there are quite a few people in the UK who do that, and they pick things up as they go along. So they don't expand their skill sets maybe as quickly as they could have done if they studied for it. You can obviously gain access to more courses and qualifications. So, for example, if you do some of the risk management standalone qualifications, you can then go on and start to take some of the more, I guess, the diploma models. So you can broaden your career opportunities as well if you have recognition. So if you, for example, are a particular specialist in an organization, but you're not professionally qualified, it's sometimes difficult to move from one organization to another. Whereas if you do have the qualifications, you can move between organizations, because that's the thing that recognizes you as that professional. Internally, it can improve your career progression. So if you have a large company with a number of divisions, so some in Africa, you might have offices in various countries. If you're professionally qualified and others aren't, when a more senior role comes up, then you're improving your chances of actually getting that job and moving forward. Or if you're going to leave your organization, you can step up. It shows commitment on your part as well, because most professional qualifications are taken while you're working. It doesn't matter whether it's risk management or accounting, you're normally doing that. And to get through that, it shows your employers and future employers your commitment, that you can actually commit in your own personal time to developing yourself. Networking. Well, this is a networking event today. I don't know whether it's a generally accepted phrase in Africa or not, I can't remember, but quite often it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? So the more times you put yourself in front of people, you're improving your network, and then if somebody all of a sudden is looking for a new risk manager, say, oh, I met Stanley a couple of months ago, I wonder if he's interested, and so, and then the final thing here is, once you've got your qualification, you feel really good and you feel a lot more comfortable within yourself, because you are a professional in what you're doing. So they're the main reasons. The IRM, we basically take your skill set and we give it a bit of a boost. Okay, so for those of you who haven't studied before, you come along, you start doing the job, and then you start to build your skill set, and that gives you confidence. It makes you feel more comfortable. So if you're challenged in meetings, you can feel a lot more comfortable within yourself to deal with that. The access to more courses, you can get exemptions from universities for elements of master's degree courses as well. So if you say did a degree in economics and then you come along and study the IRM and you finish it and you think I'd really like to do a master's degree, we have quite a few universities where you can get exemptions. So instead of having to do the whole master's degree, you can just do 2 or 3 elements, and then you'll have a master's degree as well as your institute qualifications. The more and more people, if they want risk professionals, they are asking for a risk qualification. So if you do have the qualification, then you're more likely to get an interview. Similar to that, you know, if you want to progress throughout the organization, I think, you know, having these qualifications is important. I'm going to talk about the last bit of this bullet point in a minute, which is the fact that our qualifications are built in consultation with employers. So we don't sit back and say, oh, I think this is a good idea. We actually talk to people who are employing risk managers. So we're talking to what's happening in the industry sector, and then we're building our courses around what employers want. Your commitment, if you do the diploma modules 3 to 6, you know, you've got 4 modules, you're talking about 2 to 3 years work, right? You can do it a bit quicker if you want, but you're committing your time over 2 to 3 years to actually get this qualification. The networking thing, we obviously have a lot of forums like this. There are conferences that we run in the UK and other locations. So they're all opportunities for you to do that. If you're on LinkedIn, for example, people will quite often search for fellow IRM members and try and hook up with them. So it is a good networking opportunity for you. And if you get this certified member of the IRM, it's an achievement. It's the end of the road, if you like, to becoming a professional, and you can build on that with a certified fellow after a number of years. So that, you know, it's all about developing yourself. And at the IRM, we try and give you what you need as a professional risk manager, and we try and give you something that the employers actually want. So, as I said, there are a number of routes to get through to the grad IRM, the certified member of the Institute of Risk Management, and the certified fellow of the Institute of Risk Management. So we have on the top there, you can see a standard university exemption route. So we have agreed exemptions for modules 1 to 6. So the certificate is modules 1 to 2, and the diploma in module 3 to 6. We have exemptions with certain universities. I don't think we have anything in Africa yet, but there's nothing to stop us linking up with any universities in Africa and doing the same thing here. So, for example, if you did a master's degree at Portsmouth or Glasgow, you just have to apply for this standard exemption. We recognize their course, and you don't have to do anything else. You just pay a fee for the exemption and you go through. Then we have a non-standard university exemption, which may be of interest to yourselves, and that is it's the same as the standard exemption. It's just that we don't have an agreement with the university. So the student will normally submit evidence of their qualifications, etc., and then we do a piece of work to match that to the IRM's learning objectives and content. And again, you can get exemptions up to 1 to 6. And and then we have something called APL, which is accreditation for prior learning. And in that one, you can apply for exemptions from any module based on your work experience. You normally have to have had 5 years. Now, this is for somebody at a risk manager level, so not the senior executive, which is the next review below. So you just fill in another form, you provide evidence, it's certified by your employer to say, yes, I have done this. So for example, it might be something to do with looking at risk registers and how you categorize risks and things like that. And we will just map your experience onto our sort of objectives, and then give you the exemption. So, and then the final one here is the senior executive route. And that's for your chief risk officer, head of risk, that sort of role. If you've been doing that again for a number of years, you apply, your application is reviewed, and then you have a panel interview by senior risk professionals and people from the IRM, and then you can be
granted the certified MRM. If you go through the APL route and the senior and the exemption routes, you actually get your diploma certificate. If you go through the senior executive route, you don't get the diploma certificate, but you do get the nomination of a certified member of the Institute of Risk Management. Okay. And then below here, we've got certificate level FS or ESM. So this is someone joining the Institute of Risk Management, starting their qualification at base level because they don't have any exemptions. They may have just left university. They do modules 1 and 2. They pass those. If they don't want to progress, they can stay with something called the IRM cert. So they pass the certificate. And then if they do want to go on, they do modules 3 to 6. So where does the diploma sit in terms of qualifications? It is set at master's degree level. That's level 7 if on the qualifications regulation. The certificate is at around about level 5 to 6. Level 5 is graduate, undergraduate, honours degree. And level 6 is just pushing a postgraduate certificate, and level 7 is a master's degree. Now we know that these are set at that level because of the exemptions we get from our universities. So we get exemption from the university's master's degree courses, not their undergraduate courses. On that particular thing, early next year, we're continuing our registration with Ofqual, which is the official body in the UK that says, yes, that's definitely set at level 7. We don't have to worry too much about relying on the universities. We'll have our own regulated qualification. And I think that's important for people who are not involved with UK universities to see what it is. So there's quite a few routes. For those of you who don't want to take exams anymore, if you've been in the risk profession for 5 years, this route may be something you wish to consider. Okay, so APL is, all that kind of thing is very much encouraged in the UK now. Is why make people sit down and study stuff they've already done and they've got a lot of experience and they can do it better than somebody who just sits and reads it. So we have some specialist qualifications. We've got certificate in operational risk management, which Caroline talked about, which is, as it says, it's just operational risk management, whereas all of our other qualifications are enterprise risk. So there's a lot more detail. We have a digital risk management certificate. So if you want to sort of broaden your knowledge of cyber risks and things like that, that's what that is all about. And then a specialization in supply chain risk management. So these are the sort of things that, you may have people in your team that, don't want to do the full qualification, but you've got them looking after maybe supply chain risk. So you can, get me to take that course up. The new syllabus, it came into operation in September. What we did is we consulted with employers and we asked them what they actually wanted. I've now been with the IRM long enough to see this, I guess, evolution from where it was when I first got involved to where it is now. So we moved from one particular system to the system that was running up until September, which was all exam-based. And one of the big feedbacks we got from employers was, well, that's great, they all know this theoretical stuff, but I want someone who can do the job. All right? I want them to come in and I want them to be up and running. And if I'm investing in them now, I want them to be able to do it, not just be studying theory. So although our knowledge that we teach to people has been updated, the key thing here is that all the assignments in modules 3 to 6, they're all work-based now. They're all
essay type questions, which is what you get in master's degree programs generally. And so those essays, the questions that we give the students are all based on their workplace. And if they're currently not able to do that for whatever reason, they're able to pick a case study, but it's the practical application of the knowledge they've learned. So although you can't see it on the slideshow here, there are more slides which I think will be distributed to you, which goes into the detail of each of those modules. So the module 3 is the risk assessment, control, and treatment. And then we've got organizational oversight, organizational resilience, perception, society, and we've got research methods and a work-based project. That last one, module 6, is basically the whole module is a 6-month research assignment based on your organization. Okay.
Sorry, Doug, I'm just going to quickly interrupt. If we can please wrap up in the next couple of minutes. It's running a bit over. Thanks.
Okay. So no more examinations. I've told you about this. It's totally flexible. People can study when they want, and they get marks within 6 weeks of submitting their assignment. So you don't have to wait till June and December to take exams, and they'll be available to you immediately. I'll go through this. It just shows you the stages of 1 year, 3 to 5 years, just the progression from certificate to the CMIRM. And if you do get exemptions, you accelerate along that route. Same thing here. Just gives you a time scale. You can do it in 2 years if you want, and do your diploma in 2 years. So no more study guides. Everything is online. There's greater interaction, online quizzes. It's available on all mobile devices. Your assignments are submitted through Turnitin, which is an anti-plagiarism. We plan to use Big Blue Button, which is the same as Zoom, but it's more educationally things. And we can push notifications to students. So if we update the course, we can just send a notification out immediately, and we can do things in real time. I mean, it's much more flexible. Students are enjoying it. It's only been running for 2 months now, but we're getting quite good feedback from it. That's me. Any questions? Okay.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Doug. So we've heard a lot about the reasons to become or to join the risk profession, and also the journey that we can take to become a risk professional and actually expand our career in that space. So we're delighted to have in our midst a professional who comes to share on this important matter. And I'm going to hand over to Dr. Stanley Mutenga, who will address us on this topic. Being an IRM professional and hearing about the benefits and value derived from the IRM qualifications. So thanks, Stanley. So I have asked Stanley if he can try and make up some time so that we can be on track by 10. Stanley,
thank you.
Share right.
Thank you. Let me just see if I can share my screen.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. So as Janice has already introduced me. My name is Stanley Mutenga. I've been with the Institute of Risk Management since 1993. So some of you who are members now were actually being born. So it has been a a long time. It has been a journey. And I think one of the things that actually made it for me to join the Institute was actually the professionalism, the standards that I actually saw within the Institute. And then I was a student, an undergraduate student at the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe, which Caroline actually mentioned earlier on, that the Institute is also working with the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe. Going through the IRM professional qualifications actually helped me to develop my career, mainly because of the practical skills that the course offered me at diploma level. And one of the key areas that I really liked when I was sort of the module that I covered was risk financing. Risk financing sort of was quite intriguing because my interest was actually looking at sort of corporate finance. So it actually mirrors sort of my what I wanted to do or focus on. And I've gone on to write research papers on risk financing, which has actually been helped by sort of the foundational elements or the foundation that was actually provided by the Institute of Risk Management. Some of the papers that we've actually written on some of my research papers have actually gone on to win awards based on some of the skills that we have. Also, the topic that I also chose for my PhD was also influenced by the things that I actually covered on the course, because I went on to look at risk management within insurance companies. And this has also pushed me now into the work that I'm doing now. I've gone on to teach at top global universities that we have. I also served as chief examiner in risk management for the London Institute of Banking and Finance. I also sat on boards as on the risk and audit committees, and the skills that I got from the Institute of Risk Management helped me to be able to work with these different companies, also getting to share the knowledge that I actually got from the Institute of Risk Management. The other thing that also, which the course also did, and the membership also helped me from time to time, is actually the opportunities. Whenever I'm bidding for consulting contracts, having the certification actually places you among the big players in the market. So even though our company is still quite small, the company that I work with is quite small, we've also gone on to compete with the big companies or the big firms that you have. So having that certification would actually qualify you, would actually give you the opportunity, would also unlock those opportunities that we have. So we have been pitted against the big firms, and we have actually won some contracts because you are on the same platform, you have the same, you're on the same pedestal, and you can actually go on and you bid and you win those particular contracts. So it actually gives us that confidence that having this qualification would help you, would actually give you the opportunity to actually, usually they say that the sky is the limit. It actually gives you those practical skills, that professionalism, and that is actually demanded to meet the needs of today. And we've gone on to help different companies that building their infrastructure in terms of risk management. So one of the other things that you find is whenever you go onto the IRM website and the webinars they actually do, they actually provide the current practice. So working with the IRM would actually give you that key part in terms of having to interact with other professionals within the same field, and that would actually give you now the opportunity to gain more knowledge about the latest development that you would have. So this brand, the IRM, would actually, when it comes to top employers, I remember when I was actually doing my first interview, having qualified as an associate, and one of the other things that was actually mentioned that he is already qualified as, so I was just a young boy then, when I just finished my degree. So it actually showed me that how serious I was with regards to risk management, and I've never actually looked back then. The other thing that you'd also find is the workshops that the IRM actually runs. They've actually helped me a lot, just being a member. These are run by industry professionals, and they have vast professional experience in different fields. So some of the other things that you'd also, which IRM actually offers, and having to interact with these professionals. If you want to know more about a particular area, you would actually go on to these webinars, and that would actually help you to gain the experience, know more about the area that you want to address. Because I actually work with different companies different companies in different fields. So it's actually a quick way of actually understanding about different industries that you have out there. So whenever you go on to the webinars, you actually learn more about these different fields, and this would actually give you now an easier way of actually learning more about a particular field in a quicker way, because whenever you apply risk management within different fields, you really need to understand the dynamics of that particular industry, that particular company, and what they actually do. So having professionals around you who actually work in different fields would actually give you the strong headway where you can actually go and learn more about that industry, and you actually get the knowledge that these professionals also share. So it has actually helped me, makes it much quicker, much easier to get to know these particular fields and actually apply the knowledge that I have from this particular interaction that I have with these professionals. Also, the training periodicals. Also, I remember some of the periodicals, the IRM magazine, the articles that I actually written there. There are certain articles like when I was actually starting, you'd actually find that it actually helped me to it was a point of reference where I would actually go back to the periodical and actually look at that particular article if I want to know about it, that I was learning more about a particular field. So it actually helped me actually also raise awareness of a certain thing, emerging trends, emerging fields that you'd have. So it gave me sort of the periodical is very important because the articles that are there would these are written by experts within their particular fields as well. So this would actually give you sort of some more sort of a grounded knowledge. So initially when I was starting, these periodicals actually helped me in different areas where I wanted to gain knowledge about certain fields, certain areas that I was not well aware of. I also had the chance of networking 8,000 members of the IRM, having to know, I think, when you look at Zimbabwe, South Africa, Kenya, Zambia, now Namibia, that interaction actually gives you, you are also able to meet prodigious people in the same profession. We share ideas, also we learn, and we also have to collaborate. One of the key members at IRM was actually Bill Stein. He actually wrote some of the other books that we have at the IRM. He became a friend of mine, and that through collaboration that we have. So that networking actually provides you with the chance to actually interact with different people within the profession. So the networking that even have in Southern Africa, it also gives us the chance to actually having to get known. I think some of the contracts that we've actually gone on to obtain on our at our companies, actually having actually presented at an IRM event, and people having actually to notice the skills that you can actually offer. We've actually managed to come and interact with these particular people. So there's a lot that I could I can actually say about IRM, but the profile that it actually gives you, having the opportunity to do presentations, like I said, it actually gives me the chance to network with various individuals within the profession, and this has been quite good. Then the discounts also, just to look at it with webinars, these are very expensive. Some of the people that actually come and present, if you go for their talks, you would have to pay a lot of money. But as a member of the IRM, you actually get the chance to have access to this valued knowledge that you have without you having to pay. So it actually sort of has helped me sort of access this knowledge, vast amount of knowledge that you can actually access without you having to pay. So the discount that you have, there's a lot that you can actually glean and get from the Institute of Risk Management. Then finally, you can also be recognized that we have most of the research that I've actually done was actually with other institutes, but also when you look at the IRM, it actually recognized, actually showcased the professionals that you actually have. I'd actually gone on to work on the exemption advisor panel, and through that, I've also managed to help some universities actually prepare their syllabuses in terms of actually aligning them with the requirements of IRM, because it tells whenever that alignment is very important. So we're having to work with on the investment, the exemption advisory panel. It actually helped me. I've also gone on to really sort of help other organizations. And with the research papers that I've actually done, you get to be recognized. So that exceptional work that you do will get recognized. And there are different type of awards that they actually give. Like if you look at Risk Manager of the Year, even if you look, your ERM strategy will also be recognized. No matter your innovation, all these things, you can also get to get these things recognized. So IRM actually gives you sort of the vast opportunities that you can actually have. So I always say that the sky is the limit, and my career, how it has been shaped, and how I've actually worked with companies, and how I've managed to deliver projects within companies with professionalism, and what I always actually refer to the standards that we have at IRM. So thank you so much. It has also been a pleasure working with the IRM, and actually having grown through these years since 1993. And I actually owe it to two members of the IRM, Kenneth Pamonga, who is late, then Mr. Mawoyo, who is also late. So they actually helped me so much. And then we have also a few members within Zimbabwe, but we have grown to be a bigger group. And I'm so glad and grateful for working with the IRM. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stanley. That was very interesting. I hope everyone's inspired to start studying. Okay, so on to our keynote speakers. First, just wanted to give some context. So risk management is a growing profession. And COVID has actually caused a new lens to be placed on risk management. It's caused material disruption to our work routines. It's forced organizations that has not paid due attention to business continuity and digitalization to quickly find ways to get on with business without sufficient preparation. The new normal has been introduced to the way we do business. Future business success will hinge heavily on how we adapt and innovate going forward. It's for this reason that our next session considers how to reimagine how to operate in the future. It's my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, who needs little introduction, Professor Arthur Mutambara, giving his insights on the topic, reimagining business, the imperatives of the next normal. Thank you, Dr. Mutambara. We just lost your screen, even though we just saw it. Do you just want to share again?
Okay, everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. What I'll try to do is to share with you a few thoughts on how we can reimagine businesses, how we can survive during COVID, how we can survive after COVID and beyond. Okay, let's see. All right, so the starting point is to understand the nature of the problems that have been presented by COVID. And then we say also, well, why do we mean by next normal? Why just not new normal? Well, what's different there? Then we emphasize the idea of data, analytics, and technology. And then we emphasize the importance of an evolving business model for the next normal. And then the new imperatives for leadership. What are the new imperatives for leadership? It cannot be business as usual. And then we'll structure a way forward. Now, the COVID-19 is a global humanitarian challenge, which has socio, economic, and political implications. Companies throughout the world have to respond. Professional bodies like yourselves have to reassess your preparedness and effectiveness as members. More specifically, corporates operating in Africa, in Zimbabwe, and so on, globally have to reassess themselves. These numbers, they change every minute. I had to update them this morning. 55 million people globally have been affected by this disease. 1.33 million people have died. In South Africa, 652,000 cases, 20,314 deaths. Now, these are just not numbers. These are your people, and people are sick in the hospitals. Some people are recovering. These numbers are not statistics. These are real things. These are your employees who are dying. These are your employees who are in hospital. These are your employees who are recovering. It's your customers, it's your markets, it's your partners, it's your suppliers, it's your political leaders, it's your families. So we are saying the COVID-19 has a direct impact on economies, on businesses and industries. There's both loss of lives and loss of livelihoods. So what does it mean? It means it can't be business as usual. We need to re-engineer, reimagine business. We have to reimagine our skills as risk specialists. We can look at the trends, what has happened from March up to now, and also another dimension, disproportionate impact on the poor. In the US, Black people are 13% of the population, but in terms of COVID, 26% has been from the Black communities. Okay, whites are 60% of the population, but only 52% affected by the disease. So there's a disproportionate impact on the poor, on the minorities, and hence we need to think how we can deal with that and work with that. And of course, COVID is taking advantage of poverty, lack of access to medical health, and so on. So no wonder why the Black people who are poor are most vulnerable. And the poor people are the most vulnerable. The poor are the most vulnerable under COVID. Other debates are on vaccines. There's a new vaccine which is being tested now, double-blinded studies, demographic differentiation. Some people say, no, young people are not affected. So can't we have a policy for young people as opposed to policy for the older people? The big debate between lives and livelihoods, the big debate between the health and the economy. So these are some of the issues we must be cognizant of as we discuss the ideas of the new normal. Okay, why do we have a challenge? Research of the virus depends on two elusive factors: unknown characteristics of the virus, infection fatality is not known, the duration of immunity is not known, different conflicting national responses, economic recovery will be erratic and slow. So there are many challenges that you as risk modelers, risk practitioners must take cognizance of as you try to come to terms with this disease and as you advise your clients. Okay? What are the implications? It affects businesses, it affects organizations, it affects individuals. We now operate in a dynamic, uncharted territory, ever-changing environment, dynamic environment, unpredictable environment. So we have the pre-COVID era, we have the COVID era, we have the post-COVID era. What are the strategies? What are the imperatives? And they're different depending on where you're operating from, okay? So there's need to reimagine business. There's need to rescope businesses. It can't be business as usual. These perspectives must also be dynamic. They must keep evolving. You can't have a static solution to a dynamic environment. That has to change. So what we mean by reimagining, we are changing the scope. We are saying, what can we do differently as businesses? How can we reimagine businesses? Let's talk about this idea of next normal. Why do we say next normal? We have waves of underlying disruptions. We have an ever-changing environment. We have a constant battle for survival. Or even if you're surviving, you have to thrive. And for you to thrive, you need to work much harder and much creatively. There is constant change. We neither know nor agree on a new normal. When you say new normal, what is it? It's constantly changing, so you can't agree on the new normal. You can not know the new normal. So it's better to talk about the next normal. Today's new normal is not tomorrow's new normal. So new normal becomes an oxymoronic statement. We must have a notion that says next normal, which is more dynamic, more transient as perspective, more appropriate because the environment is ever changing. So we are saying, let us embrace the idea of a dynamic and transient perspective. So this is the basis of the next normal as opposed to the new normal. We don't know, neither do we agree on the definition of a new normal. So it's better to talk about a next normal. That's the rationale. Okay. What are the dynamics shaping and driving the next normal? Change of demand and its nature, digital consumption, new types of consumption, transformation of the labor market, reskilling, digital skills, and distributed networks, changes in resilience of expectations, mitigation of COVID disruptions. The rules are changing, the regulations are uncertain, evolution of the virus, also understanding the virus. Important to understand and explicitly address these factors. So these are the different factors that are driving the new normal, the next normal. So we must be able to come to terms with these drivers and say, how do we reimagine our businesses to take into account these matters? Okay, what can you do? You need an evolving business model. It can't be static, it has to be evolving. What are some of the issues? Redeploying talent, shifting employees and retraining them. Pivot production, changing from current products to new products. You have to do pivot production. Shifting operations, using different shifts, 2 to 3 and vice versa. Re-engineering and launching new business models. Multiplying productivity so that you can run at 80% with 30% of the labor. These are the elements of an evolving business model, which you use in the next normal. Redeploying talent, pivot production, shifting operations, re-engineering and launching new businesses, and multiplying productivity so that you run at 80% with 30% of the labor. These are some of the elements of an evolving business model for the next normal. Okay. What are some of the elements? Again, fit for purpose operating model, decentralized organization with clear decision rights, data and analytics. Now, we got to embrace the idea of data analytics and technology so that our decisions are driven by data. Our decisions are driven by analytics. Cross-functional teams that are agile and resilient, greater efficiency, better performance, and customer responsiveness. These are the elements of the evolving business model we need for the next normal. Okay, why do we say data analytics and technology are critical? Forecasting is no longer practical. Predictions are so yesterday. You can no longer forecast economies. You can no longer forecast health. You can no longer forecast regulations. What you can do is to measure. What you can do is to collect data. You now need to deploy data-driven strategies. You have to deploy dashboards. So the dashboard of data, the dashboard of metrics is what is going to help you understanding the role of data analytics and technology. Okay, what do we mean by data analytics? The science of analyzing raw data in order to come up with conclusions about the information, leveraging diverse types of data, leading to data-driven business strategies, data-driven decisions. So going forward, we want metrics, we want measurements, measurements about customers, measurements about suppliers, measurements about partners, measurements about regulations. This is the way forward. Data, analytics, and technology are the way to reimagine business, are the way to survive in the next normal. But of course, you must understand the source of your data. You must understand the limitations of your sources. Why? Because there's so much fake information out there. There's so much fake data. So you want to make sure that, yes, you use metrics, yes, you use measurements, but you also understand the source of your data and the source of your metrics so that you can effectively have a data-driven strategy, an analytics-driven strategy as you reimagine your businesses, okay? Many of the techniques and processes of data analytics have been automated. So you can use automation now to use data. Data analytics can review trends and metrics that would otherwise be lost in the mass of information. So analytics now is making sense of information, making sense of data, so that you can review trends and metrics that would otherwise be lost in the mass of information. You can use data analytics to optimize processes, to increase the overall efficiency of a business. That's why we're saying we need many diverse types of data to drive our businesses. That is how we're going to survive under the next normal. We have to have a new mindset. Don't tell me about jobs, tell me about livelihoods. Don't tell me about CSR, creating corporate social responsibility. So yesterday, we want creation of shared value. Okay, creation of shared value is very different from CSR. CSR is so yesterday. We want creation of shared value. We want to talk about livelihoods. We want to talk about the impact of skills. Don't tell me I've got a PhD from Harvard. I've got a PhD from Wits. What can you do? What skills do you have? What is the impact of your competencies? We are no longer interested in traditional nature of skills. We're talking about problem solving, critical thinking, learning how to learn, mastering how to think, blended learning, entrepreneurship, patents, job creation. It's a brave new world of impactful competencies and capabilities as opposed to traditional skills. Show me what you can do. Don't tell me your certificate. Don't tell me where you went to school. Give me, show me your capabilities. Demonstrate capacity to solve problems. These are the new skills, the new mindset we need in the next normal, okay? Remote working, working from home, virtual working, wrong language. When you say remote working, when you say working from home, when you say virtual working, you're assuming there's another place you work from. But no, working from home is the work. Virtual working is the work. Remote working is the work. So we don't want to use this language because it supposes that there's some place where the real action is taking place. The real action is taking place remotely. The real action is taking from home. The real action is taking place virtually. So we need to move away from the pre-COVID perspective. There's no such place where real action takes place. Action takes place everywhere. What is the right language? Distributed working teams, shared working environment, decentralized network of colleagues. This is the new language you want in the next normal. COVID language and post-COVID language has to be about distributed networks of teams, shared working environments, and realizing that we can no longer go back to business as usual or to the old way of doing things, okay? What are the new leadership imperatives? The CEO, the COO, the CTO, all these levels of business leadership must now have a new way of doing things. Number one, all the C-level leaders must be data-driven. They must be metrics-driven. They must be technology-driven. Those are the new imperatives for all leaders. You must be data-driven. You must be metrics-driven. You must be technology-driven. Okay? Every one of these leaders in business must understand and leverage data, must understand and leverage analytics. They must understand and leverage technology. That's a major imperative for the leader as we reimagine business. We want to see resilience. We want to see boldness. We want to see empathy. We want to see ethical leadership. Those are the imperatives of leadership in the next normal. A resilient leader, a bold leader, an empathetic leader, an ethical leader. Right? What else? The leader must think differently. Don't think like an incumbent. Don't think like a market dominator. No, think like a hungry disruptor. Think like an innovator. As manager of the company, as the CFO, as the general manager, do not think like an incumbent. Don't think like a market dominator. Think like a hungry disruptor. Think like an innovator. Think like a new entrant. Think like an attacker. These are the new imperatives for you to survive in the next normal. Don't behave like a traditional industry player, the market leader. The market leader must think like an entrepreneur, must think like a new entrant. This is what we call the COVID-19 leadership challenge and opportunity. A crisis is too important a thing to waste. So take advantage of the crisis to become the new leader who thinks like an entrepreneur, who thinks like a hungry disruptor. Okay, what are some of the issues here for the CEOs? Unlocking bolder and bigger aspirations. You must now elevate your to-be list to the same level as to-do list. Most of us are very familiar with the to-do list. I have to do the following, I have to do this. What about to be? What are you going to be? So for the leader, you must elevate your to-be list to be at the same level as your to-do list. And we'll talk a bit about that. You must fully embrace the idea of creation of shared value as opposed to corporate social responsibility. What we want now is doing well by doing good. Doing well by doing good. Don't make your money and then give money to charity as a nice to have. No, make money because you're doing good. Make money because you're saving the environment. That is the issue we're pushing around CSV. Okay, harnessing the full power of the CEO to peer networks. So you must make sure that you also leverage your network. We are emphasizing the issue of global best practice among the CEO leaders. Okay, so all these issues are important. You must serve the business, you must serve the environment, you must serve society. Okay, let's talk about this idea of the to-be list. Okay, what is the meaning of a to-be list? What do we mean? We are saying that what type of leader are you? What is the DNA of your leadership? What is the essence and style of your leadership? Okay, you must interrogate that as a leader. What type of leader are you? What is the DNA of your leadership? What is the essence and style of your leadership? Then once you've done that, then you can come up with a to-be list. The things you want to become, the list of new attributes that you must adopt and internalize as you transform yourself and reimagine business. What are some of the things we're talking about? So you can look at what you are already and then see how you can move to the next level. The new leader must aspire to be an ethical leader, an empathetic leader, a meritocratic leader, a technocratic leader, a data analytics and technology-driven leader. These are your to-be list. If you're already ethical, fine. But what we emphasize is that you must aspire to become an ethical business leader, to be an empathetic business leader, a meritocratic leader who believes in meritocracy, a technocratic leader who understands data analytics and technology, a self-aware leader, and an empowering leader, a better version of yourself. This is your to-be list. The to-be list must be as important as the to-do list. This is the challenge we have for the next normal, okay? All these ideas, boldness, resolute, inspirational, self-aware, self-awareness. is very critical. Empathy is very critical. Discipline, resilient, effective, efficient. Okay, so yes, some of them you already have. Look for things that you don't have and say, I want to be efficient. I want to be self-led. I want to be empowering. I want to be strategic. That's what we're emphasizing, that there must be a migration from what you have to the new leader by establishing a to-be list. Okay. And then also address the other big issues: humility and maturity, self-confidence versus arrogance, character is everything. All these matters should be addressed. We can talk about some of these things in our discussions. What is the moral of the story? The to-be list, what you want to become, must be as important, if not more important, than the to-do list. What you want to become must be more important than the list of things you want to do, okay? And then you can ask yourself a number of questions as leaders. What qualities am I bringing to being and showing up today? What is it that I want in my to-do list? That's how each of us want to do. Now, the notion of build back better, this has been talked about quite extensively as people think about COVID and post-COVID. The wrong question, however, is to say, how do I return to what I was before COVID? Wrong approach. You can never go back. So when you say, how do I return to what I had before COVID? That's a wrong approach and you won't succeed. You can't do that. You have to think about, how do I reset? How do I reimagine? How do I rewire? How do I rescope? Both businesses and business models must be re-engineered. They must be reimagined. You can't go back. You can only go to the next normal. There are 4 building blocks you need as you build back better. Number 1, we've already talked about this, evolving business model, the right organization. Number 2, the new business mindsets. Number 3, data analytics and technology. And number 4, the leadership imperatives. These are the 4 blocks, and we've spoken about those 4. So as you reimagine the business, please embrace those 4 blocks: evolving business model, the new business mindset, and then the idea that at the center of our discussion must be data, analytics, and technology, and that the new leader must have different perspectives. Keep in mind those 4 blocks. That's what you need to reimagine your business, okay? Now, there've been some winners. Not everyone has done badly under COVID. The digital companies have done very well. So move to the virtual space, move to digital products so that you can also do well like Amazon, like Facebook, like Microsoft, like Zoom. These companies have thrived under COVID because they're operating in the virtual space, because their products are predominantly digital. So in your own way, find a way to leverage the digital space, find a way to operate in virtual space, so that you can also be as successful as these companies we've done very well in the next normal, okay? Special companies, Zoom, Microsoft and Teams and so on, these guys have made so much money out of this COVID era. All companies can be winners if they embrace the next normal, if they embrace the 4 blocks to build back better. So this is the survival template for your companies that you advise, for the companies you work for, the companies you own. Let us all embrace the next normal. In particular, let us embrace the 4 blocks to build back better. Okay, just to show you some serious numbers. Amazon.
Sorry, Prof.
Yes.
Sorry, Prof.
Yes.
We are running out of time. Can I
okay,
ask you
I'm
to
concluding.
Thank you.
Okay, so these companies 67%, Facebook 76%, just a dramatization of those who've done well within the next normal. So you can do well as well, okay? Way forward, we are saying understand the imperatives that are driving the next normal, and then also understand the new leadership imperatives. Then reimagine your business, review the global economic outlook, and also assess and evaluate various economic scenarios so that you can succeed as a consultant, succeed as a manager, succeed as an owner of a business. thereafter take a plunge and embrace the next normal. Welcome to the brave world of the next normal. And success can only be achieved if we reimagine a business. We no longer need engineers. We need reimagineers. We no longer need engineering. We need reimagineering. I thank you very much for this opportunity, and then we can do the questions.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that brilliant presentation. I think it is quite a mouthful to try and highlight what you have said, because in there were nuggets of wisdom that are not comparable. We will go through the chats and pick out issues and questions, but so far, Prof, there is none that have come through specifically for you. What is interesting to note is just the appreciation coming through from the participants. The insights are pretty amazing and I think instructive in terms of what we can do going forward. Thank you, Prof. As we continue to consider not the new normal, but the next normal, as Prof has just shared with us, the role of the risk professional cannot and should not be underestimated. Indeed, the profession must play a defining role if we're not to be left out and considered somewhat irrelevant. The profession must prepare itself to add value in the next normal. Now, to share some critical tools on this aspect, I'm excited to ask Mr. Eusebius Maxia to talk to us on the role of the risk professional in the next normal in contributing to sustainable development. Over to you, Eusebius. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to be part of what is an amazing lineup, an amazing agenda for the day. Just to make sure technology is working, how is audio and visuals my side? Am I visible enough, and is the audio clear enough?
It's perfect. It's perfect, Eusebius.
Excellent stuff. It's wonderful coming after Arthur. I last saw Arthur as a fellow Rhodes Scholar when I interviewed him when I was a student, and he was living here in Johannesburg. He probably won't remember it. And I've loved his career, not just in politics, but also as a brilliant academic. And I think the contribution you made this morning, Arthur, is really, really, really fascinating in terms of the power of data analytics, but how those technologies need to be harnessed by those who are experts within the risk space. And my presentation today is going to dovetail what Arthur was saying, drawing on my own skill set and my own background as a political analyst, as well as a philosopher. So there's a couple of things that I want to do. But before I get into the meat of my talk, I just want to say from a process point of view, I do like engaging as a talk show host, as a journalist. So if you do have questions, we can agree, disagree. A lot of this is not a perfect science. Part of what we're trying to figure out in 2020 is exactly what this new normal is, and what are more efficient and more effective ways of trying to make sense of the uncertainties with which we will permanently be living with as a human population. So anything and everything that I say will be agreeable. If you want to affirm, as you did very generously with Arthur, that's fine. If you want to push back, feel free to do so. I'm going to periodically check in the chat box whether there are questions. And it is my preference that we have a dynamic conversation over the next 25 minutes before we have a hard stop at 11 o'clock. But there's a couple of things that I want to do. If you had looked at the wording for my talk, there's a word that I used there, and the technical word is irrelevant. It's the concept that I want to explain, is that the fundamental pivot that I think is required by your profession is to adopt a synoptic approach to risk going forward. And the word synoptic is more than just a fancy word to show off over lunch and to impress your friends and your family and with if you expand your vocab. The concept of a synoptic approach to problem solving is one that is the basic thread that will run throughout my talk, And that is really ultimately the contribution I want to make. And hopefully in your breakout sessions, some of you will find it useful to come back to the idea of a synoptic approach to risk analysis. So the overarching message that I have for you before I get into the minutiae is that we have to unlearn the way in which we've been trained at university, in the world of work. The more you spend time at university, the more you spend time in a firm, in a particular profession, you become more and more of an expert with a smaller area of expertise that you have. And as a result of that, you become a subject or a technology specific expert. And what I want to propose today is that the big lesson of COVID-19 for all of our professions, but in particular for risk analysis, is that we have to unlearn some of the ways in which we were taught our best practice for how we go about dealing with uncertainty from a methodology point of view. So that's where I'm going to be headed with my talk. But I want to start off by telling stories, because I love telling stories as a talk show host. And I want to tell you a personal story, and I want you to just stay with me. And I'm going to tease out the lessons from the personal stories to what I then call the synoptic approach to risk analysis a little bit later after I'm done with my story. I'm 41 years old. It's a strange age to be. You're not that old that you're thinking of retirement, but you're no longer so young that you are feeling invincible as you might have done in your 20s or when you were an undergraduate student. And so for the first time, you are now possibly encountering all sorts of events that you did not predict, much like COVID-19 is an event that the world did not predict. But for you on a personal level, if you are in my age group in particular, you probably are beginning to experience events that you didn't predict, and maybe they're coming faster than you had hoped that they would. For me, one such event is when I ended up in hospital about a year ago, almost exactly to the day, after just collapsing in the middle of a broadcast while doing my job as a talk show host here in Johannesburg. And I ended up spending a whole week in hospital with doctors trying to figure out what the heck is wrong with Eusebius. And it was a really interesting experience because I thought I was not quite fit and healthy with the six-pack, but I didn't exactly think that I had potentially life-threatening conditions that I may have to think about from a health profile point of view. And then I got a rude awakening because an event that was not predicted by any doctors beforehand is an event that happened to me. And much like the world in 2020, I now had to deal with the consequences of a black swan event at a deeply personal level. And it was really, really interesting during that week of being in hospital, because then you get being subjected to diagnostic tools that different professionals bring to the process of trying to figure out what is going on in this body before us. Here is a physical body. This is what the body experienced. Now we're trying to figure out what the hell explains the event that had happened and what should be the appropriate intervention to try and make sure that it becomes fit for purpose again, so that this person can leave the ICU and continue to impact the world in the way in which that he has been. And during that process, I saw everyone from neurologists to psychologists to ENT specialists to physicians, and eventually, as a team, they worked together and they came up with an hypothesis. And I'll spare you the detail of what it is that they decided had happened to me, and then collectively decided what the interventions are to statistically reduce the chances of a similar event happening in future. They didn't completely succeed. I had health difficulties again this year, but they reduced the chances with their intervention. But the reason I'm telling you that story before I talk to you about a synoptic approach to risk is that it struck me philosophically when I reflected on that experience, that the body is irreducibly complex and that there isn't a single story that you can tell about the body. As you are watching this wherever you are, on your laptop, maybe on your smart device, maybe you're sitting in Zim, maybe you're sitting in England, maybe you're here in South Africa, you are engaging with me as an irreducibly complex organism. You are not only cells. You are not only a mind, you're not only spirit, if you believe in a spirit realm, you're not only psychology, you are each one of those different elements irreducibly and in an interlinked kind of way. And if we think about the body, and Arthur, as a scientist, could probably give a far more eloquent and rich description than I can as a philosopher, the body is a complex system. And even though a biologist tried to understand the body biologically, a psychologist through the lens of psychology, a neuroscientist through neurobiology, ultimately, the truth of the matter is that even though each professional wants to reduce the body down to a single story that fits their expertise, you've got to get all of the different experts in one conversation to have a conversation about Eusebius Mackiser, so that you can get the complete story of who Eusebius is, what is happening to Eusebius, what is going right in his system, what is mistaken in his system, where is an error that has been discovered, and how do you remedy that particular error. And as a philosopher, the way I would describe that is, as I've already alluded, is that the body is an irreducibly complex system. Now, the reason why that is important is that it suddenly means that even though you were qualified as a psychologist, you don't have the first and the last word about the health of the person in front of you. You've got to speak to other health professionals in order to make sure that, in fact, you get the most complete understanding of the patient that it is that you're trying to deal effectively with, who's presenting all sorts of symptoms that they once solved in front of you. And that brings me to the idea of a synoptic approach to risk. I have worked as a political risk analyst with so many of my business clients here in South Africa. And very often what I find is that many of them are used to, when they try and answer a question such as, should I invest or should I not invest, is to plug and play into a maths model and to try and work out what the net present value is of a potential investment. And armed with your business science degree from wherever you studied, so whether it be Harvard, whether it be England, whether it be UCT, the assumption is that my maths model will be the one tool in my toolkit that I will use to decide what the level of risk is when it comes to investing the money of people who are venture capitalists and who are thinking of putting some of their money into a smelter plant, let's say, for example, in South Africa. Then the model spews out an answer that suggests actually future revenue streams look quite positive, and therefore the opportunities are on the up if you really are very keen to benefit from a potential smelter plant in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. Go for it, right? That is what your clever 21-year-old newly minted business science graduate from UCT tells you, or perhaps you work for, as I previously did and Arthur did, work for a management consulting company like McKinsey. You and your colleagues from Germany are plugging away the maths model, and the answer is invest. 3 months later, your money has disappeared, because the one thing that you might not have factored in is the reality of political risk, and that the regulatory environment, which party is in charge, which minister within a particular party is in charge, may be more important determinants of whether or not it makes rational sense for you to invest than what it is that in fact your maths model had told you. And that is what happens when you are a singular minded professional who uses the toolkits that are familiar to you, that you are fluent in, as the only toolkit that you take with you to work when you are going to be involved in a risk calculus about whether or not to take a particular decision. And the temptation there is to be understood as one that makes sense, because if you know nothing other than how to build an incredibly hygienic maths model, then of course it makes sense that you're going to be resorting to the data that you've put in there, the data analytics that Arthur was talking about, and you use all of those powerful toolkits as a basis with which to make a decision about what it is that you want to do. But 2020 has taught us that actually we make a mistake in that regard, that as professionals with different disciplines and different backgrounds, we actually need to talk to each other in a cross-disciplinary way instead of being arrogant about the complete picture and the complete understanding of risk that each one of our individual expertise will in fact give us. So when you go to a conference that has to do with risk, you should never again wonder, why do we have Arthur the scientist on the agenda to speak to us? Why do we have Eusebius, the journalist, the political analyst, as one of the keynote speakers? I can skip that session and come back until after lunch when we have our technical breakout sessions, or mid-morning when we do more specific issues that have to do with my immediate KPIs. The reason why that is a mistaken posture to adopt after this year is that this year has taught us how irreducibly complex society is. Just like the body, you as an organism are an irreducibly complex system that require health professionals with many different backgrounds to all be in one room to make sense of you as an irreducibly complex system. Similarly, if you want to be able to provide the best possible advice and to be able to give the best possible services as a risk analyst, as an expert in risk assessment and in dealing with uncertainty, if you want to give the best possible advice to clients in the private sector, civil society organizations, or to governments that you work for, then it is incredibly, incredibly important that you understand the limitations of your own expertise and that you understand the importance of leveraging the expertise of those who are subject experts in areas other than the ones that you have been taught in. Because never again will we be able to make sense of society and the risk profile of the decisions that we need to take unless we have a synoptic approach to problem solving. And so to distill the idea of synoptic approaches to problem solving down to a sentence, a synoptic approach simply means that instead of becoming more and more narrow in your expertise, that you widen the disciplinary contact points that you have as a risk analyst so that you can make proper sense of all of the necessary cross-disciplinary input data that you need to take cognizance of when you are in fact providing expert advice around unpredictable future events for governments, for non-state actors, for private sector players, or for organizations within civil society. Now, I don't know about you, but that can be, on the one hand, it's not a particularly sophisticated insight, but on the other hand, it does require us to do business unusual in ways that may be incredibly, incredibly challenging. Take, for example, psychology. How many psychologists are in this conversation? We've got, if I just look at the number of participants here today, we've got 123 participants here. How many of us here, if we were in a hall, I'd ask you to put up your hand, have got degrees in psychology? And yet the psychological profile of your clients are critically important if you want to understand their penchant for risk-taking. If you do not know the psychological profile of your clients and their appetite for risk and where they fit from a psychology point of view on the spectrum of being risk-averse or being risk-takers, then there's a limitation to the nature and the kind of advice that you can offer them. And yet I wonder, when I engage with risk experts like yourself, when many of you are building your models and you speak numerically and graphically, and in a powerful way, use the kind of data analytics that Arthur was talking about, I often wonder how much of your work intersects with, for example, the latest developments in experimental psychology. And yet there are incredibly important developments in experimental psychology that you need not to be an expert in, because you can't be an expert in all subjects, but you need a certain basic fluency, or at the very least, you need professional relationships with professionals adjacent to your own expertise so that their expertise can be leveraged so that you can have a far more irreducibly complex approach to risk taking rather than simply saying, here's my standard model, here's my maths model, here's the data analytics software that I've just bought of this particular service provided into the industry, and this is what my company is using, and that is the most important toolkit that I use before I dispense advice to my government or to a private sector player or to some other non-state actor that asks for my advice. And it's so important that we understand the importance of speaking to people whose expertise are very different to ourselves. I'll give one more example, and then I want to engage any questions that have come up. Arthur mentioned an area that I'm particularly passionate about myself. As a philosophy lecturer and graduate, I specialized in ethics and specifically in racism and whether or not people are morally responsible for who they are and for the beliefs that they hold. But in general, ethics as a field of expertise is an area that I cared for quite passionately as one of the big branches in philosophy. And yet, it is very clear to me that when it comes to, for example, understanding where ethics should fit into our risk analysis, that many folks with either an information systems, IT, or a general commerce background in your field have done perhaps a one semester course on professional communication or ethics for accountants, but you don't necessarily have a deep level of understanding technically of what it means to build ethical leadership within your firms and what it means to take account of different levels of ethics when you dispense advice around what it is that you are advising your clients to do. And that's another example of where we need cross-pollination between disciplines. You can no longer begin to build future-fit companies, future-fit states, unless you actually have precisely the kind of leadership in place that Arthur was talking about. But just because you can say the word ethics and everyone has a viewpoint about ethical debates and about moral debates in society does not mean that you are an expert on ethics. There are many of us who have studied many, many years to be able to truly understand what ethical systems are about, how we can get individuals and corporate citizens who are legal persons but not real persons to be incentivized to behave ethically. And that's an entirely different complex set of expertise that you might not have as an accountant, that you might not have as a computer scientist, that you might not have as a data scientist for that matter. And again, the idea of cross-pollination between disciplines here is critically important. If we want to problem solve for the most urgent socio-political and economic crises and business challenges, then we need leaders who understand that it makes business sense to be ethical. But if you don't speak to someone who's technically an expert at ethics, then you will not be able to dispense the best possible advice that you might be able to as a risk analyst. And so if I had to summarize everything that I'm saying, and then I'll pause after the next 30 seconds, what I am suggesting is that there's a certain intellectual humility that each of us needs to end 2020 with. We need to understand what our expertise enable us to speak authoritatively on when we dispense advice to one another, to our clients, to whoever it is that we provide services to. But we also need to understand that the idea of a single methodology with which to solve a problem is one that we need to leave behind in 2020, and that we need to enter 2021 with an appreciation that nothing less than a synoptic approach to problem solving is how we are going to survive as corporate citizens, as governments, as non-state actors, and even in our interpersonal relationships with one another. We need to leverage experts and expertise across disciplines, and that means undoing what we were taught at university and in the world of work, where career progression is often described as increasing your levels of expertise And now I think we need to switch into a mindset whereby we recognize the limitations of that kind of approach to problem solving, so that the next time you put together a team that tries to solve a massive problem for Zimbabwe, for South Africa, or for a particular client, that you look for diversity in expertise rather than having people who all have the same technical area of expertise. I want to leave it there. There's quite a bit to put on the table. And then if there are any questions, I'm happy to take questions or react to some of the comments in the chat box.
Thank you, Eusebius. I think a couple of questions have come up on the chat box. How can we meaningfully engage politicians on the ethics in order to mitigate political risk? Is the one question that has come through. Allow me to take the second question, and then you can take the two of them together, Eusebius.
Okay.
Consider that the profession still grapples with so-called lack of buy-in from non-practitioners, e.g. executives and boards. How can we use some of our prepositions to enhance buy-in?
Okay, I'll answer those questions quickly. If we run out of time, because we only have 3 minutes left, you can get my details from the organizers and email me, and we can pursue anything that you'd like to pursue. So my details are available, but I'll give top-down answers for now. Those are fantastic and very complex questions. Strategically, the way to engage execs and boards, strategically, the tactical detail requires 10 minutes. But at the strategic level, what you want to do is to make the business case for why a synoptic approach to problem solving makes business sense. In the same way in which, when Arthur was talking about the idea of an ethical leader, I was thinking to myself, it is important to reiterate, and this question gives me an opportunity to do so, that ethical leadership isn't just important for its own sake, but because it makes business sense. So if you have bosses, if you have shareholders, if you have boards, if you have executives who don't quite agree that it makes sense for an IT company to hire a postgraduate who has got a philosophy degree or an ethics specialist, you need to make the business case for why it makes sense. It's not the ethical case, not the political case, the business case. In the same way in which, to take an analogy, we now have established business cases that have made the business case for diversity, so that when we appeal to corporate citizens to take diversity seriously, equity when it comes to racial demographics and leadership and middle management, same with gender, we're not just appealing to morality, it makes, we now know, rands and Zim dollars cents to care deeply about diversity. And that would be my starting point. If I had 20 minutes with your board, I would immediately start by giving them a business argument for why a diverse set of skills in our hiring strategy makes complete sense. And the same goes for political risk. The political risk question is a little bit easier because here, as citizens, as voters, and also as corporate citizens, we can simply push back through the democratic processes. When we vote or when we decide who to support politically, we have the opportunity to adjudicate between the political parties and politicians on the basis of characteristics such as ethics. So there, it's very easy. You signal to the political market what traits you like most within the political market. And if you're going to be supporting unethical parties, then you are incentivizing politicians to be unethical. So you've got to incentivize politicians, political parties to be ethical through your vote and through the resources that you dispense. 'Cause, 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 'cause
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Eusebius, for your insights, and thanks everybody for the questions. So we really appreciate the insights provided by the keynote speakers. I think both of the speakers really gave us a fresh approach and a different way of thinking about certain topics that are quite relevant today. So next up is our panel discussion. But before that, we're going to take a comfort break. And when we return at 11:10, we'll introduce and kick off the panel discussion. So thanks everyone. We're going to reconvene at 11:10.
Good morning again, and welcome back. I trust that the comfort break has allowed us to take care of all the niggling things that would come in the way. We move on. So next up, we have a panel discussion chaired by Mr. Francis Ziba from Zambia. The discussion focuses on the importance of collaboration, and we'll be hearing from other risk disciplines. I'll hand over to Francis to briefly introduce the panel members, as well as share some insights and guidance on how the discussion will run. Over to you, Francis. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph, and thanks, Denise. Good morning, everyone, from wherever you're listening us from or from wherever you're watching us from. Today's panel discussion looks at the importance of collaboration and other risk, and how we can hear from other risk disciplines. This is a panel discussion, and I think I'm delighted to say that I have 3 able and qualified experts in their own fields, and I think the conversations will be more informed by them as I'm just sharing this conversation. But I think I want to speak more about what collaboration is. I think most of you are well aware that as people's skills become complex and specialized, I think collaboration as a practice today has become more important than ever. But what does collaboration in itself mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to organizations? What does it mean to corporations? So other people look at it as a buzzword that maybe in itself may be seen as an empty cliche or so. But I think in many respects, collaboration in a workplace is what has made most successful tick. Most successful corporations today, most successful organizations today, I think, have thrived on the need of collaboration. How do departments, how do individuals within their respective fields collaborate to attain a certain objective? In many respects, I think collaboration may be defined as a group of people who come together and contribute their expertise from the benefit of a shared objective, which is for the purpose of a mission or objective. A good example will be looking at a photographer working with a designer in order to create a cover design, which you may be looking at. Departments conveying or coming together with other teams to plug away or to look at quarterly goals. How do they attain those goals? So in other words, collaboration is basically a process of group work, but it's also a learned skill. But how well can you, as individuals or as organizations, collaborate with others and make sure that you impact your organizations in a positive way? Most organizations today collaborate at all times, constantly, if I may say. So collaboration in most of these organizations has been ingrained. It's become the culture of how they do things. It has become the culture on how they work, on how they relate to their stakeholders. But that said, I think it's worth taking a step back to evaluate at how you and your stakeholders can collaborate. So to help me have this discussion, as I said at the preamble, I have three able discussants. The first of these discussants is Ms. Lingo Ngubani. She's a disaster management expert. Ms. Ngubani is a director responsible for disaster management and fire and rescue services at the Gauteng Provincial Disaster Management Center. At her post, she has been instrumental in the drafting of the Gauteng Disaster Management Risk Policy Framework, as well as Level 1 Disaster Management Plan. Other major achievements include the establishment of current Disaster Management Center for the province, as well as responsible for the coordination of major incidents and disasters. The second discussant is Ms. Janita van der Kloof, a business continuity management and enterprise risk management expert. Through her expertise in strategic planning, business continuity, and enterprise risk management framework, or management rather, she has become a catalyst for change in most organizations globally and across multiple industries. Janita is passionate about empowering individuals and organizations to think differently about the way they do their businesses and also the way they manage risk, as well as how they respond to this changing environment. And then, as a doctor from the medical field, we have Dr. Blessing Gara. I was told that I shouldn't finish pronouncing that name, otherwise I might bite my tongue. He comes from a health and well-being section of his health background. Dr. Blessing is a medical doctor who's passionate about occupational medicine. He's currently a registrar in occupational medicine with the Faculty of Occupational Medicine of Ireland. Dr. Blessing is also a national secretary for Zimbabwe International Commission on Occupational Health. And he's been in this position from 2015 to date. He's currently employed as a medical services manager for Mimosa Mine, Zimbabwe. So to the panel, I say welcome to the discussion. And to start the conversation, I'll give each panelist, starting with Dr. Ngubani, a 5-minute presentation, I think, in order she can give an overview of disaster management. To you, Ms. Ngubani, thank you.
Good morning, Francis, and good morning to the participants. I'm going to request that I present with my video off. I'll probably switch it on at the end just so that you see my face. I'm just worried about my network connection if I've got the video on. Okay. Maybe just as an introduction to my presentation, I just wanted to explain firstly that the legislated term in South Africa for disaster management is considered to include all elements of the definition of the term disaster risk management. So as a result, I'll be using the South African legislated term for the function in my presentation. Just as an overview, when dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic in South Africa, a state of disaster was declared by government and numerous regulations and directives were issued to guide response to the pandemic. And during this process, one has realized that response to COVID-19 became more than just managing disaster risk, but it actually became a human rights issue. And mitigating the spread of the pandemic resulted in us as disaster management practitioners recognizing that various disciplines are not only important for managing risks, but to ensure that we uphold human rights as enshrined in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the country. So in the context of us managing disaster risk during COVID-19, 3 key issues amongst others became prominent. Firstly, it was the right to health, where we needed to ensure that health services were available and basic services were provided in communities. The right to a safe and healthy environment, where we need to ensure that others comply with regulations in and outside the working environment. The right to dignity and the right to privacy became very important because it was not only for those affected, but also for officials as we go about implementing regulations and directives. The most important factor was, though, that our response must continue to cut across all disciplines and be in line with COVID-19 regulations, from basic things like deciding within the country who goes to work and to at what level do they travel and how do they buy goods and services. And the reality of all of this involved collaboration and the fact that we had to continue to work together to mitigate the spread. And as we go to the next slide, I think one must try to explain that the most critical issue is that we need to continue to have a better understanding of risk, which is why disaster risk management then becomes more critical ever than before. So priority 1 of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction also places an emphasis on understanding risks and all its dimensions of vulnerability, capacity, and exposure for the purpose of risk assessment. Of importance is that we always need to bear in mind that disaster risk assessment need to become a central part of implementing the disaster management function. As you can see in the diagram in front of you, the central role played by disaster risk assessment can be demonstrated through the key performance areas and enablers of disaster management, which we use as part of our policy framework in the country, where you can see that it's evident that the second key performance area, in as much as the other key performance area are also important, plays a key role in ensuring that it affects all the key areas of the function, and it is the basis upon which we do planning, whether it's micro at community level or planning at a macro level. But I think as I conclude in my 5 minutes, Francis, I just want to say to the conference that the importance of firstly implementing legislation cannot be undermined, but also what COVID-19 has taught us is the lesson of ensuring that the capabilities for disaster risk reduction, as well as capabilities for disaster management planning, must exist in every organization and in every sector. Thank you. That will just be my introduction for now.
Thank you, Ms. Ngubane. Thank you for that informative discussion or beginning. Next, we'll move to Ms. Janita van der Kloof. She's from South Africa, and she's looking at business continuity management. Thank you. Janita, over to you.
Good morning, or is it good afternoon rather? I'm not sure. Hello everyone, I'm Janita van der Kloof. Thank you for joining, and yeah, privileged to be here and be part of this conference. And I think it's such a relevant topic that we're covering as a panel today. And it must have been one of the biggest lessons I learned during COVID is the importance of collaboration. And therefore, I think there's two parts to it. The one is the internal collaboration and really breaking down the silos of the traditional risk management functions to work together as an organization to create more resilience. And you'll see I focus a lot more on resilience because I think that you can't look at business continuity management in isolation. It's part of a bigger program that needs to be implemented. That's the one part. The second part of it is that we as organizations don't exist in silos. So we're part of a bigger society, community, and part of a bigger ecosystem. And this is really a word that even in the business continuity context has really opened up and really been the focus, as we need to, as part of an ecosystem, if we fail, if there's a disruption in our business, there's a disruption in the bigger supply chain, and we need to ensure that we plan for that. So to my slide, and I spend hours thinking about how do we integrate resilience? How do we, what does that framework look like? And I want to start with the important thing that talks about strategy. And strategy, for me, I think what has happened is the organizations that were agile in their strategies and that could quickly pivot and respond were the ones that did well with COVID-19 as well. So it's scenario planning, is understanding our risk appetite and tolerance. It's understanding our strategic risks and opportunities in the context in which we operate in, and then also sustainability, quite an important point on that as well. Then looking at our governance, we need to understand and map our stakeholders, understand the expectations. So we spoke about disaster management just now, is understanding the acts and that we need to adhere to. How do we support government in the implementation of disaster management act as organizations? having the right oversight, understanding reporting and escalation, so having the right data available to make the right decisions, and then very important, collaboration and really coordination and really bringing everything together. I think that's quite important. And then just the difference and link between risk management and business continuity management. For me, anticipate and withstand, that's being proactive, that's understanding my operational and project risk. And I like to break that down even further to say operational resilience. What's my critical processes? What's my single point of failure? How do I respond to those? Financial resilience, which is something that a lot of organizations didn't plan for properly. Cyber resilience, which talks to our RTC systems. We've seen a lot of cyber attacks and a lot of cyber risks in this time. And then third-party resilience, understanding our interdependencies, understanding that ecosystem and where it can break. And then we have respond and recover. So as we've seen with COVID, we had something that happened that was really outside of our control, but then we need to do our response planning. So incident management, emergency response talks about our physical threats, crisis management, and once again, the link with the disaster management is the fact that in our crisis management, in our strategic response and decision making, we need to bring in the disaster management, the requirements, the protocols, all of that needs to be adhered to. And then the more traditional business continuity, where do we go work from, ensuring we have mobility, and then our disaster recovery, which talks to our IT systems. And then all of this supported by combined assurance. And Denise, if you can just maybe press one more on, then we'll get the most important part that I think that really that encapsulates everything is people, because we can have the best plans, the best procedures. And as you've seen with COVID, if our people aren't doing well, none of that is going to be effective in any way. So we need to focus on creating resilient people. We need to focus on their well-being first. We need to create a risk-aware culture where there's trust and there's transparency, and ethics. That's something the previous speaker also alluded to, the importance of ethics, and something I'm passionate about is being passionate about what we do and creating that ownership, which is so important from a risk management point of view. So as I said, this is still work in progress for me, but this is something that I've built during COVID to really visually show the importance of collaboration and importance of creating resilience rather than just focusing on IRM or BCM. In our view, that has been kind of creating resilience, but I think there's a lot more that we need to consider. And I'm looking forward to the discussion with other panelists as well.
Thanks, Janita, for that informative introduction to the topic. Next to discuss health and well-being is Dr. Blessing Gara. Dr. Blessing comes from Zimbabwe, as we introduced. So over to you, Dr. Blessing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think my job here is quite easy, because from the previous speakers, I think the most important thing that COVID has shown us is that organizations, they are people-centered, and that is crucial. We need to understand that without the people, then there is no work that that goes on. I really liked the way Prof approached it, to say that we talk about statistics, the figures that we see. But the most important thing really is to understand that all those figures are real people in management positions, real people who are our employees, real people who are also people that are buying our service, are buying our product. So to attack this issue of health and well-being, or health and wellness, I feel that it is important to define what health and wellness is really all about. We talk about health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And this has really come to fore when you look at COVID-19, because the mental aspect and the social aspect has really played a very big role in the way we've approached the disease, and in the way that the disease has affected our livelihood, our way of life. And then we talk about wellness as an active process of becoming aware of and learning to make choices that improve our health and well-being. And then well-being as the capacity to balance everything. We talk about purpose, we talk about meaning, or meaning in life. And this brings us to an individual who is better geared to deal with the challenges in the environment that they operate in. The next slide, we'll look at wellness dimensions. Wellness dimensions are quite elaborate. Here I've put in two slides which talk about wellness dimensions. And you can find that if you are going to Google it, you'll find that when they talk about wellness, they can talk about up to even 12 dimensions that are involved. But here I've put in a basic minimum of 6, which look at a human being as in the center of a lot of aspects that they need to deal with so that they can be productive and that they can have the well-being that make them able to function properly within the ecosystem that they are found. And then we look at issues to do with the health continuum, where we look at health as something that is a continuum from a medical paradigm where we're treating disease to a wellness paradigm, which really look at how can we make people more healthy so that they can be able to manage the day-to-day challenges that they face. So I think that is very, very important as we go along, especially in this COVID era, where we have actually looked at it and shown that it is going to be, we're talking about it being the new normal, but now I can see that the next normal makes more sense. Next slide, please. I've talked about this issue of health being an overarching concept that goes beyond the physical. And then we talk about the disruption that the COVID-19 has had on the social support and interactions, a loss of earnings, loss of employment. And then we talk about issues to do with the psychosocial aspects of the pandemic, where there is a massive mental health problems. The social media platforms have not helped that much in that aspect because there's been information overload, and many a times many of the information that comes through come from unreliable sources. Some of them is actually fake information that comes through. And then we have lockdowns that have torn the social fabric, and these are now being used for different purposes over and above disease control. So as we say, COVID-19, the next normal, we're talking about a paradigm shift from disease prevention. When we started, we were talking about trying to limit transmission as much as possible. But now we've come to a point where we're saying that if it is the next normal, we need to learn to survive with the pandemic. One of the keynote speakers also talked about issues to do with wellness, being aware of the condition of your body, and being aware and being able to manage issues to do with obesity, pre-existing medical conditions. And also we are looking at protecting our vulnerable employees within the workplace. The next slide will look at how do we proceed? Now, how do we proceed? Looking at what COVID-19 is now, it's as the new normal. The most important thing really is to let science lead the way. We need to have a capacity to have expert advice at critical levels of decision making, both in the public and private organizations. And then the issue that we're talking about here, the importance of collaboration. I think that is very, very important. When we tailor-make our risk response approaches, it is important to include as many people as possible so that we are not blindsided. I have a personal experience where we set up the COVID-19 response for the organization that I'm working with. We had to look at all the aspects, risk, finance, procurement, our supply chain. We look at our human resource, and we look at safety systems within the workplace so that at least we are able to deal with the issues that come from COVID response, from COVID-19, and not miss anything. Then we talk about the issue of the value that we place on health. We talk about it, a pandemic of proportions of COVID-19. It has been foretold for many years before. Scenarios that were done by the Global Business Network in 2010 with the assistance of the Rockefeller Foundation talked about a pandemic causing disruptions at the global scale. And then also we talk about the global risk reports in 2010, 2015, they talked about pandemics also being something that would disrupt business worldwide. So we talk, there are issues to say what are the additional health risks that have been brought about by COVID-19. Maybe not additional health risks, but COVID-19, what it has done, it has amplified pre-existing problems. The inequality in access, Prof talked about it in terms of its effect on the poor populations within the world population. So
Okay.
we amplify some of the issues that are pre-existing. I think this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc, for that wonderful introduction. Firstly, I think I just want to remind everyone that this is a panel discussion. So we expect all participants to contribute. I think we're talking about collaboration. So I think we want to engage as much as we can with the participants. So I'll invite questions later in the discussion. So in your chat on your right, for most of you, I think you can drop your questions there or your comments, which I'll refer to after this conversation, after this conversation. I think it should be about 10 to 12 when I'll attend to those questions. Now, coming back to my participants, I think let's put this in perspective. Firstly, let's look at your respective areas. So we're talking about disaster risk management. We're talking about business continuity. We're talking about health and well-being. Prior and post-COVID, where do you think these frameworks were, right? Where were these frameworks? And then after COVID, where do these frameworks stand today, right? And then you can also speak about how collaboration has helped to put these frameworks at the state at which they are today. I'll start with Ms. Ngubani. Where was disaster risk management from your perspective? I think you sharing from the South African perspective in Gauteng, to be particular. Where were these? Where were the disaster management plans, post and prior?
Thank you very much, Francis. The disaster management plans before COVID-19 were obviously there because disaster management in its nature is multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral. But one can mention that one of the key weaknesses before COVID is that we were not planning together. And I think after after the COVID-19 pandemic, I don't think there's a government department, organization, or stakeholder that is not willing to collaborate in disaster management activities moving forward. And over and above just participation, one can suggest that now that we are in the pandemic and moving forward, the new normal would be planning together, where we must appreciate the value we can add in each other's disciplines. We need to share experience and learn together through simulations and exercises. And I think maybe I could just end off by what the one of the key speakers spoke about in his powerful speech, where he talked about reimagining our skills and developing to the new normal. So that is my view around where we should be right now and where we should be going moving forward. Thank you, Francis.
Thanks, Ms. Ngubani. Yanita, in terms of your experience, where do you think business continuity plans, enterprise risk management plans were before and after COVID? And how do you think collaboration has helped to put them where they are? Thanks.
Yeah, I think prior to COVID, it's been seen as something that is compliance. A lot of organizations treated risk management and business continuity management as a tick the box exercise. So we have a plan, it's there, if the auditors come and request the plan. We saw a lot of lack of buy-in at a senior strategic level because I think, in my view, there was a lack of understanding of what these plans are supposed to do. And then lack of communication, exercises didn't happen the way they should have or wasn't deemed to be important. So if organizations had business continuity frameworks and plans, it was really almost a paper-based exercise. I think moving towards where we are today, I think COVID really forced organizations to focus on business continuity management and risk management, to relook at it as a strategic enabler and a must-have, something that has a real value and impact on the business, because people had first-hand experience of what business continuity management is. It wasn't just, okay, let's pretend this office is not available and we all go work from home. It was practical. We need to work from home because we can't go into the office because of the pandemic. So what now? So I think it's really forced collaboration with IT. It's forced collaboration in terms of communication. How do we communicate to our staff members? How do we communicate to our external stakeholders? It's really also focused, I think, and I don't think there's like a perfect picture right now. I think the important thing is that we do a proper return of experience. I'm doing this with a lot of my clients at the moment, just to say what worked, what didn't work, getting people together. Like I said, I do something I call the resilience forum, where we just get all stakeholders around a table and we talk and we create a platform, and it minimizes duplication of effort, and it really steers towards a more collaborative, coordinated response to any disaster. And let's be honest, COVID's not going to be the last thing that we're going to face in our lifetimes, and therefore I think the need for it has been amplified with COVID. I think Dr. Blessing, he said that prior to COVID, we had issues, but COVID just really amplified some of it. And I think that's quite important, that we continuously improve, that we use this opportunity to work together and to communicate and create those platforms for us to work together to be better prepared next time.
Thanks, Janita, for that. Now, coming to you, Dr. Gara, in terms of the health and well-being of the people or the employees, staff, and almost the general public, I think that the health aspect is something that we've always tend to take for granted. What do you think, what are some of the risks which you think COVID-19 has exposed in the health sector, for instance?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think, as I've previously said, wellness issues or strategies were there in the workplace. But as one of my fellow panelists has said, we used to pay lip service to it. You know, we used to say wellness is right there, but it's not in the mainstream. You know. Because as they usually say, health is never valued until the presence of infirmity or in the presence of disease. So I think what COVID has actually brought to the fore is that corporates or even governments, they need to really take a look at the health and well-being of populations. It is important. They need to make sure that the facilities to treat, the expertise to treat, research in treating, it should be there, and it should be built. Capacity should be continuously built. So I've seen a lot of governments grappling with setting up facilities to manage COVID. We've had isolation facilities in many areas operated by governments, which had been in a state of disrepair because nobody really cared much about it. But now we're actually seeing that government are now starting to invest in facilities. Corporates are now starting to invest in facilities and making sure that they have the correct or adequate skill to manage issues to do with health and well-being. So I think this issue, it has actually just amplified the challenges that we had before. And it might actually be a blessing in disguise, really, because at the end of the day, what is going to happen is that people now are starting to say this is the next normal, and people are now starting to invest in the health and well-being of populations. Companies are starting to invest in the health and well-being of their employees to make sure that, because they now realize that companies can actually close, business continuity can actually be impacted negatively by an unhealthy population. And if they don't safeguard their employees in terms of health and well-being, then it is the loss to the company in the long run. So I think that is what COVID-19 has really brought forward.
Thanks, Doc, for that. Maybe coming back to Janita, I think what I want to understand from you is basically how enterprise risk management has been linked to what you're doing in terms of business continuity. Because in most cases, I think we're looking at enterprise risk management as a holistic way of looking or managing risks within organizations. So from your perspective, how do you think, or what, one, obviously, how do you link the business continuity management plan vis-a-vis your IRM?
So it's a difficult question because I think everybody grapples with the link and the relationship between business continuity management and enterprise risk management. And that's why I chose to look at both, because I don't think you can separate them. Okay, so enterprise risk for me is being proactive. It's really understanding, like you say, the holistic view of risk exposure of the organization. Business continuity management, we really look at, we don't look at likelihood of things happening. We look at the impacts of things happening, and we plan as if it's already happened. Okay, so those are two, and that's your reactive, that's your response to something. I think the important link for me would be to ensure that your business continuity program, your crisis management, all your response planning can cater for the risks that you have elaborated on in your enterprise risk management framework. So what I usually do is, and I like to use scenario planning as a tool as well, to ensure that I almost stress test my risk management, my risk registers to various different futures, because risk management should essentially be forward-looking. And I think the challenge has been for a lot of organizations with this whole quarterly reporting is that we almost look backwards to what happened in the quarter and then we report on that. And we don't challenge ourselves looking forward to say, but what are the uncertainties that we can face in the future, and ensuring that we plan for that. So one would be to bring an element of scenario planning, and it's been very effective, especially with the very high rate of uncertainty that we're facing with COVID-19 and not knowing what exactly that next normal will look like and where it would go. Would there be a second wave? How long are we going to see the impact of this? And number two is then, when you do your business continuity management planning, is to look at your enterprise risk management risks and say, let's test some of these. Let's say this risk materialize. How do we respond? And is our business continuity management program effective in responding to these risks? So I think it's a bit of a twofold, and the link is not always obvious. So you need to make that link, and it needs to be very deliberate.
And Janita, maybe very quickly, under 30 seconds, are you able to tell me where the business continuity plan sits in the overall enterprise risk management framework? Is it part of it, or it's standalone? I think that's been the misconception between the two, and most people don't understand. Maybe you could just stress on that point. Do these sit together, or is one part of the other?
In my view, we should move away from having just risk management programs, and we need to have risk and resilience programs, of which business continuity management needs to form part of. We need to evolve as the environment around us is evolving, and I don't think risk management can be a standalone framework anymore. It needs to be risk and resilience, and business continuity forms part of that. So that's
Thank you for that clarification. Thanks a lot. Ms. Ngubani, back to you again. Again, it's a question of linking disaster risk management with the enterprise risk management framework itself. I don't know, from your view, what has been your experience? How are these two connected? And do you think there's been an importance of doing risk assessments within the disaster management context?
Yes, absolutely, Francis. And from my side, the biggest question that I would also like just to pose to the conference is, how are organizations adapting to disaster risk broadly? Not just looking at their own organizational risk and what it is that is a risk to their organization, because that is what has caught us off guard with COVID. We need to say, how do we evolve? Because also not just by developing plans, because government says so, we need to develop plans for disaster management. But we need to make decisions as organizations, because those decisions that we make in adapting to disaster risks not only affect organizations, but they also affect communities. Because if you look at how disaster response during the pandemic, let's say the lockdown, specifically the level 5 lockdown in South Africa, how things unfolded was that it was the very organizations that government was relying on to support communities in terms of food and so forth. So for me, in linking the two, one would say that it's about not just an organization, but the community. And also it would be about also in the organization, how do we strengthen governance to manage disaster risk? So yes, in my experience, I think it's absolutely important that as organizations, we don't look at just our enterprise risk, but we look at disaster risk broadly. And then we look around also about what contribution can we as organization make in communities broadly, because an organization is also part of the community. Thanks, Francis.
Thanks for that, Ms. Ngobani. Maybe again, just to reiterate what you just said there, I think what I wanted maybe to understand from your perspective, I think as a disaster management expert in this, when you look at enterprise risk management framework or your risk professionals within your organizations, and also you look at you yourself as a disaster management expert, how then can we use this term, this buzzword of collaboration? How do you think this can help us in terms of enhancing business performance within these organizations? How can we ensure that the two, enterprise risk management and business continuity management professionals collaborate to help organizations in their performance?
Okay, I would want to say that the proposed framework, having looked at it, that Junita just presented, would be one of the things that would fit perfectly, because I think one of the things that she talks about, which is key, is about governance and how do we strengthen governance within organization. And then if you look at the resilience framework, and I'm now quoting one of the speakers, it's just to say that you look at the proactive part in terms of operations, and then you look at the response planning. So I would like to really take from Junita to say integrated, resilience framework is one of the things that we may need to consider. But also when one may just want to add to say that when you look at, how the organization functions, it should be in the context of what is happening around the organization in terms of disaster risk broadly. So the organization should not be blinded by its operations, but should actually focus broadly on what are the risks that are happening within its environment, so that as it plans moving forward in terms of responding to disaster risks and even organizational risks, all those things are taken into account.
Thanks, Ms. Ngobani. Dr. Gara, maybe a question to you in terms of this collaboration that we're talking about. I think we've seen most governments, not just in the region, but globally, try to engage more with health experts in this field. But in terms of risk management, do you think there's been a component where these government officials and health experts have engaged risk experts or collaborated with risk experts to understand what the impact of COVID-19 in this perspective?
Thanks, Francis. I think that is where the biggest disjoint was, in terms of when the pandemic started. Many governments did not appreciate fully the reach of the problem. Many people thought it was just going to be a health crisis, So I think to get a fuller picture of what was going to obtain from the pandemic, I think many governments, it came as an afterthought. It happened later on during the progression of the pandemic to engage other disciplines and most importantly, risk managers to look at the overall risk of what this pandemic would mean. So I think this issue of collaboration at that point, it didn't kick in as early as it should have. you know, so that at least everybody could actually understand the magnitude of the risk that we're managing at the moment, at that time. Because when you look at it, many people just thought it was going to be a health risk. They didn't think about issues, what would happen in terms of lockdowns, the knockdown effects of lockdowns, what it would mean to the social fabric of many of these nations. And now we can actually see, as they start to escalate lockdowns and the measures that were in place, it was a realization now that maybe the response was not really measured to address all the other risks that would emanate from what was done in the first place.
Okay. Thanks for that. I'm still looking into the chat. So far, I'm only seeing comments there. I can't see any question. So I'll go back to my panel again. Janita, to you again. I think I want to look at it as most of these businesses build resilience strategies. How do you think collaboration may help in terms of businesses and also the business continuity management professionals?
I want to just add to something that both other panelists also alluded to, and something that please. I've really seen. And
I'll give you a minute and a half for that. Thanks.
Okay. It's the ability to be agile, so the ability to move quickly. And I think the one thing that we've learned is that we need to trust our experts to make decisions. So we need smaller decision-making teams of experts that we trust in order for us to respond quickly. And I think a lot of organizations took a very long time to make decisions because they were waiting things out and they didn't want to take ownership of it, but they were also not sure because they didn't have enough information because they weren't experts in the field. There's very little experts in the whole pandemic field and what the potential scenarios could be. So I think going forward, the important part for collaboration and creating more resilience would be to have that trust, to create that ownership within, and a lot of it's about creating the right culture. If you create the culture, the right culture, I think 80% culture and 20% is the actual physical plans that you have in place. And I do think our focus is actually more 80% on the plans and the risk registers, and only 20% are creating the culture and educating people. So I think my focus would be on creating a right culture of trust and transparency, and in that way also build resilience.
Yeah, thanks for that. And as we maybe summarize, I want you both to, as you summarize, I think, respond to some of these questions which are coming in. I'll give a minute to each of you to summarize the conversation. The first question is, what's the best approach which organizations can take in order to safeguard mental health of employees? I think as Dr. Gara summarizes, I think this is a question you can take into, which you can take up. And then there's also another question here which refers to how do we deploy integrated or holistic approach and interventions on ticking box mentality and organizations with naive risk maturity. Maybe both Ms. Ngubane and Anita can also respond to this as you summarize. So I'll give a minute to each, and I'll start with Dom, please.
All right, thank you, Francis. I think the issue of mental health is very key. Even prior to COVID, it was a very key issue because we've realized that a lot of people, they suffer from mental health and they suffer quietly. But now COVID-19 has placed people in isolation, has given people a lot of uncertainty, anxiety. So as organizations, it is important to be preemptive about those issues. You need to have counseling services on site. You need to have hotlines. You need to have people who are prepared to assist employees at any given time. And also as an organization, it is important to build in the culture of mental health capacity, to assist counseling services within supervisors and managers, and also to support, to give social support for those people who have been infected or affected by COVID-19. So it is important to be preemptive. That is the most important thing about mental health issues.
Thank you. Janita?
think I'm going to have a short answer to this one as we conclude. And yes, the importance of collaboration. And I think the question was more around maturity levels and moving from a tick the box to a more integrated approach. If there's a naive risk maturity level, and my answer to that would be education. So I don't think we as risk practitioners spend enough time in the business trying to understand the business and the challenges they have, but the other way around is we also need to then educate the executive and our management and our staff around what is risk management, why it's necessary, and how do we create resilience going forward. So my answer to that would be education, collaboration, and I think through collaboration there's an opportunity for education and for creating that awareness.
Thanks, Janita. And finally to you, Ms. Ngubane.
Thank you very much. From my side, I think what is key around moving forward would be for us to build that institutional capacity for disaster management in our organizations. We need to conduct those disaster risk assessments because we don't want to be found wanting again. And when we should respond quickly and we should respond more effectively. But on ticking the box mentality, I see it's already 12 o'clock. Just to add to what Janita was saying about public awareness, we need to learn together. We need to share experiences. We need to practice whatever it is that we've put together, be it in terms of plans and be in its actions that we've conducted for preparedness. So from my point, just as closing, those are the key things that we need to start doing together.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to the panelists, and thanks a lot to the participants who've been listening into this. And as I end, I think one thing which I really need to stress on this is the issue of collaboration as we drive forward into this next normal, as it's been referred to now. It's no longer the new normal, so let's move forward to collaborate more with our stakeholders. In terms of the questions that have come in, I think I'll ask my participants, or rather my panel participants, to respond to those questions in the chat. And next to you, I think, Denise, it's over to you. Thanks a lot for everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis, and the panelists for the very lively discussions.
Oh, thanks. Next to you, Joseph. I said Denise. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right. All yours now. Thanks.
Thanks. We will now break for lunch till 12:30. But before we go, I'd like to just give a slot to Rory, who will explain to us how we check into the respective breakaway sessions. I would suggest that we all log into the sessions of our choices before going to lunch so that we are able to have a smooth start when we resume at 12:30. Once the breakaway sessions have come to an end, you will automatically be thrown back into the main conference session. It is important that you raise your questions and round up the discussions on time so that you do not feel that you've been abruptly cut off. Just a reminder, we have 4 different streams going: 1 on climate change, 2 on economic revitalization and continuity, a 3rd on social economic issues and related risks and the impact of technology on the risk landscape. You will find a host in each of those sessions ready to welcome you. Over to you, Rory, in terms of how this thing is going to work when we resume. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. That's great. I hope everyone's been enjoying the session so far. It's been really interesting listening in. So yes, basically, I'm about to open up the 4 rooms, which you should be able to see now. So yes, very, very simple way to access them. If you hover over the main Zoom window, then you will be able to go to your control panel. And from there, there's actually a little button that says breakout rooms. If you click on that, then you'll have a pop-out window that shows the 4 rooms available. I think you'll have to scroll to the very end, just seeing as there are quite a few attendees here. Simply click on the one that you wish to join and then click join. That takes you through to the session, and yes, the host will be and are able to present to you there. If it is that you need to switch sessions, then it's just a simple task of clicking on the icon for the breakout rooms again, and then selecting a different session from there. It might mean that you need to leave the room first, at which point press the red button in the corner, and then I'll take you to the main session, and then you'll be put through to, then you can select another session by going on the icon again. These are automatically set to close down, so I'm going to time that for 1:30. And yeah, I can see people have started to go for it already. If you are having issues with this, then please send a message in the chat, and then we'll see if we can assign you from there. Thank you.
Okay. I assume you can see me. I don't see my own picture at the moment, but let me see. I can see that, yes. Okay, so thanks everyone. We're in the final stretch and we're right on time. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the motivational speaker for this afternoon. And we're delighted to address a matter that we all individually need to take care of. So we all need to look after ourselves. And let's listen to Nomfundo Mugapi, who is an expert in the field, and she's going to share a topic that is very close to our heart. And I hope that we will all take some personal messages from this. Because obviously, as we know, the softer part is just as important as the technical part. So I'm going to allow Nomfundo to share her screen, and then she'll take us through her presentation. So thank you. Thanks, Nomfundo.
Thank you very much for having me in this important meeting. I think COVID-19 has just indicated to us how important risk management is. In our organization, if we didn't have our risk management team, I don't know how we would have made it. So it's really an honor to be here. I'm just gonna try and, okay. So thank you so much. And the fact that you've actually called me here and you decided that in the midst of this important gathering, you are going to highlight the dealing with the self. It really excites me because I think this is what I've been saying even before COVID-19, that in our continent, in Southern Africa, we have a crisis that if we don't focus on dealing with ourselves, actually the biggest risk for our capacity to be successful in our organizations has to do with the self within these organizations. And as I would be presenting today, I would really like you to wear 2 hats. Part of it is talking about you as an important component of ensuring that we are able to facilitate risk management within our region. But also I am hoping that as somebody who works within risk management, I'm really passionate in us see a critical component of risk management, because I've seen many organizations with excellent risk plan being actually sabotaged because of the high levels of mental wellness issues, poor self-care, people who are burnt out and exhausted. And I would really like to argue today that with COVID having happened, the next work is how do we integrate and make sure that when people are talking about risk management, they understand that self can be one of the biggest risks. So just to start by painting those of us that have been working in the field and to just paint what we have been seeing in relation to the impact of COVID-19 in globally. And what we have been saying is that COVID-19 has, I think, impacted us in ways that we haven't fully appreciated. I think there is some kind of appreciation on how it has impacted us in terms of our own physical health. And at the level of economics, I was just in the breakaway that was talking about the economic issues. There is an appreciation of how devastating COVID-19 was in relation to the economy of Africa and Southern Africa. But I really think that as a society, we haven't fully appreciated just the level of devastation that COVID-19 has brought in us as various practitioners in our work, in our institutions, and in our homes. And for me, this is one of the biggest risks for us, because if we don't fully appreciate this impact, then we will not understand at times why there is increased conflict in the workplace, why we are burnt out, why we are exhausted. I have met so many people saying, I guess I'm tired. And if we don't appreciate that this is part and parcel of this emotional one of COVID-19, we can easily give up. So I really want to start first by just painting the context of what we have been seeing. And then I will talk about what then does this context call for us? What is it that is required? And I'm hoping that I'll have some time to look at some of the strategies for how we can begin to deal with this. So what we have been finding is, what I have black there is that in the color black, that some of the responses that we have brought in to try and deal with COVID-19, which are necessary and we needed them, whether it was the quarantine, whether it was lockdown, whether it was self-isolation, for a lot of people, it triggered very strong emotions that negatively impacted their mental wellness. So isolation meant they couldn't connect with the people, and human beings by nature are social beings. We thrive when we are connected. I mean, interestingly, studies have shown that for us to function, we need 4 hugs a day. And for us to thrive, we need 8 hugs a day. I don't know how many hugs you've had today. If you haven't, I always tell people that just also give yourself a big squeeze because you really need that. But the response to COVID is such that we cannot even touch people, we cannot hold people. So the very things that we've done to try and protect ourselves are the things that are putting us at risk at an emotional level. And what you see there on the red is the impact that we're seeing in organizations. I'm sure that some of you have got leadership responsibilities, whether it is in your organization or at home or in your own community. You might have managerial, supervisory responsibilities. The level of stress amongst leaders and managers, it's in ways that I don't think we've really fully comprehended. There's various things that have impacted this. A lot of leaders will tell you that, we are just performing on a survival mode. We are on an autopilot. We are seeing high levels of burnt out and stress, the level of fatigue, just people saying, I'm not just tired, I'm fatigued. We are actually equating this level of fatigue to the fatigue that we've seen during World War II. So if you are feeling that it's difficult for you to just wake up in the morning, even the things you loved to do are no longer things that motivate you. It is because you have been emotionally impacted by this pandemic, what we call collective trauma. At an institutional level, you've already talked, I've heard in the various drops, we are faced with changes like never before, whether it is at a technological level, economic level, but we've also seen an increase in team conflict. We've seen high levels of conflict within the organization, people really struggling, even with people that they used to get along with, but the ones that were difficult for them, really struggling to deal with what people might call difficult personalities for them. And this issue of moral injury, especially some of you who had to make very difficult decisions as being involved in risk management around people's lives, what puts people at risk, who can come to work, who can't come to work, what needs to be done. So a lot of moral injury, which has to do with making tough decisions that are linked to people's livelihood. So what we're saying is that, that the already fragile human capital that we had and social capital has been, the situation has been exacerbated by COVID-19. Now, what becomes even more difficult is that for those of us in Southern Africa, and I think this applies to most of our countries, we don't have the blue, which I call the safety net. And for you to understand that, I will use an example. So what we've done in our organization is to understand that There is no way we can survive unless we make the self and taking care of the self is an integral part of our work. So when COVID-19 hit, we met with other organizations, one from Denmark, one from the Philippines, one from Liberia, and then myself from South Africa, all the executive directors of these organizations. And twice every month, we just talked about our experiences. Now, the colleague from Denmark said something which was really powerful, which for me highlighted why self-work and self-care is not a luxury, it's not even a necessity. I think it is the next struggle for our society. What she said was, you know, for us, it was much easier to be resilient and bounce back because we had inherited centuries of a good relationship between the government and the people, the authority and the people, leadership and the people. So that actually gave us a safety net when we were able to bounce back. But the reality is that unfortunately for most of us, COVID-19 came and hit us when we were already operating in what I call wounded context. Already at an individual level, a lot of us and the people we work with were carrying high levels of trauma that was not dealt with. Our homes that are supposed to be spaces, and studies have shown this, that when the home environment is caring and supportive and containing, it actually facilitates our capacity to bounce back. But the reality is that in most of our countries, our homes are spaces of stress, and they've actually become places of violence, increased levels of violence. The very same communities that we work so hard for are themselves very trusting. There's been increased othering and blaming, and just the fault lines in our society have actually deepened. This therefore means that, and I've heard this with a lot of people who've said, no, Mfundo, but it is difficult to work in these countries. Interestingly, a colleague from the Philippines, one of the directors said, you know, I mean, I understand, I see COVID-19, I understand it's difficult, but why, I just feel this added burden, like this extra jacket that I'm carrying. And I said to her, it's because you are operating in a context that is different from Denmark. You have all this collective trauma that you understand, but most of us are carrying historical trauma that was not dealt with. We are carrying intergenerational trauma and we are carrying collective trauma. No wonder it is so difficult, if not painful, to actually do our work. And I think the challenge then and the implication for risk management is that in order for you to be able to do your work well, you need to have the capacity to cultivate, and I call it cultivate because it has to be work. This context requires that we cultivate our most resourceful self. It requires that we bring the self that is focused. You know better than me how focused you need it to be. You need to remain calm. So if you appreciate this wounded context that I've described in the previous slide, it means that if you are working with 20 or 30 people, and most people that are involved in risk mitigation and risk management have to work with a lot of people in the organization. When you are working with people who bring their own trauma and bring their own wounding, sometimes they dump it on you, or at times they trigger your own trauma. And therefore, unless you learn how to be calm and not allow yourself to be triggered by those people, you are likely not to bring your most resourceful self. You need to learn to, yes, identify the risk, but still keep the hope. But most importantly, this requires that we be present to everything that is happening around us, within us, in order to ensure that we are all safe. But when there is such high levels of trauma and wounding, this is the most difficult thing to do. Because if I am present to everything, I also have to be present to my pain and to my struggle. And a lot of people, instead of being present to themselves, because being present brings all this unresolved trauma and pain and stress, they tend to then avoid facing their pain. But when you avoid facing your pain, you also avoid dealing with the things that are critical for us to deal with. So what I would like to propose today is that there is certain regional level in this, I put in inverted commas, post-COVID-19 world. One of them, and in this context of wounding that I've described, is this concept of triggering. I don't know if you have had this experience where you go to the workplace and someone just says something rude, or someone says something that you think is disrespectful, or someone says something that you think is painful or careless. But when that person says that thing, it lasts for much longer. You carry it with you for the whole day. You carry it with you at home. We call that triggering. So triggering happens when certain emotions are triggered and they are lingered for a longer period of time. And when we have been triggered, and there's been a lot of exciting studies that have been done in the past decade around understanding the brain and how it functions. And what we know is that for us to function properly in the workplace, we need our rational brain, or because this is where our executive functions are the people called the cortex, and mostly this frontal lobe that helps us to make decisions, that makes us to think, that makes us to problem solve. So this is the part of the brain that needs to be active. But when we are triggering, when somebody says something that touches our pain, that is painful, that is difficult, and sometimes it could even be linked to something that happened in the past for us, what then happens is that this brain that we need for functioning becomes disabled, and the emotional brain takes over. And when the emotional brain takes over, it becomes really difficult for us to deal with the facts, to deal with a lot of information, but most importantly, we become toxic and we create toxicity in the environment. I'm sure some of you are dealing with people that you could consider are creating toxic environment. Some of them is not because they are difficult people, it's just that they are wounded people and they are not even aware that there's things that happen in the workplace that trigger them. The other risk in the workplace that is related to self is this concept of emotional hijack. And emotional hijack happens when the cortex, the one that I've described, becomes disabled. Because for you to function, you need for your cortex to be activated, right? And this is when you have learned the skills to calm yourself, to be relaxed, to cultivate your most resourceful self, and to be focused. However, when we are stressed and we are faced with such the things that we faced during COVID-19 and currently in our workplace and all the decisions, the danger and the risk is that the higher cortex can become disabled. And when this happens, you've got emotional hijack, right? And this is when you are no longer able to function properly. And I always say to people, then the wound takes over and it takes the forefront and the vision takes the back front. I don't know whether you've been in those spaces where you just see somebody who gets so angry that they even forget what is important and what matters because they've now been driven by the wound. And this issue of triggering and emotional hijacking is one of the highest risks in the workplace within our countries. And I have talked to a number of people, and a lot of people will tell you work is difficult. Yes, there's a lot of work. We are overwhelmed. But if I were to ask you and say, what is the most difficult thing for you in your work? A lot of you will say it is the people. Whether the people who our bosses who are themselves wounded, I have a whole conversation about wounded leaders that we can talk about, or it is our colleagues who themselves are wounded. And we therefore have to learn to say, how do I take care and protect myself when I operate in this wounded context? How do I not let my wound and my pain take over the work that I'm supposed to do? And you know, the sad thing, somebody says something that is really powerful, and I always say this quote. It says that if we are wounded and we don't deal with our wounds, we are going to bleed on the people that never caused the wound. Unfortunately, the people that suffer the most is not just the workplace, it is also our loved ones and the people that we love the most if we don't take care of ourselves. So I'm just going to spend the next few minutes to then highlight strategies. What are some of the things that we can be able to begin to do? The good thing is that you can actually, there is training, there is work that can be done to be able to facilitate the skills that people can learn. And so ideally, the skills of resilience building, of self-care, of prioritizing ourselves, of dealing with woundedness is the things, the first university of learning this, the first institute is the home. But unfortunately, most of us are born in homes with parents that are broken. I know in South Africa, My parents were busy in the struggle. They were busy dealing with themselves. My dad was busy being called a boy. So he himself was too broken and wounded to can create in me and teach me the skills that I needed. We went to schools. Our teachers were too broken and wounded to help us to do this. So most of us, when we enter into the workplace, we haven't learned the emotional skills and we become our biggest risks. So we have to relearn these skills. We have to unlearn and relearn. And the good thing is that you can actually learn these things. There are strategies that can be done to do this. Of course, there isn't enough time now to highlight all of these, but I'm just going to touch on some of the areas of interventions that are critical, and hopefully you can either approach me or a life coach or anyone. If by the time I'm finished here, you leave here and saying, look, I am the most important ingredient in ensuring the success of my work and my organization. So let me go and deal with myself. And you pick up a phone, you call a counselor, you call a life coach, I would have done my work. So the first thing is, at an individual level, there has to be a significant, actually, I call it a revolution. There has to be a revolution in Africa. We have neglected the work of the self for too long, and it is costing us at a leadership level. It is costing us at an institutional level. Our institutions are dying, not because we don't have capable people. Our institutions are being destroyed because the very same people who love these institutions are so wounded and broken that they bring toxicity that destroys these institutions. So there has to be a revolution in how we understand work. The first thing is we have to be awake to ourselves. The crisis of our continent and of our region and of our countries is that we are so asleep to just how wounded we are. And when you are asleep to your wound, it becomes even more toxic. So revolution in being awake to ourselves and investing in our self-care. And we have to start seeing healing work as a necessity. And when you sit at work and you tell someone, I'm going to see a counselor, they say we have to begin to say, yes, that's good. This is a critical component of your work in order for you to be successful. So really, we have to all to begin to say that self-work is an integral part of my duty, especially if I'm going to be working with risk mitigation, because you as risk mitigation officers see sort of the darkest, the worst possible case scenario. And you are the one who has to warn people in advance. So you have to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you will end up burning yourself. Somebody once said, Guti, as I do this work, I cannot light a candle and burn myself in order for other people's candle to be lit. And some of us do that because we operate in wounded contexts. I think at an institutional level, I have always, even before COVID-19, been talking about woundedness. And I've been saying that this is the next move that we needed to do in our society. But when COVID came, I've had an opportunity to work with various organizations, being called to various institutions. I'm telling you, the level of toxicity that I am seeing in our organizations is making me sick to the core, because I am realizing that if Africa is to thrive, we cannot go on like this. And this toxicity is caused by unhealthy leadership, unhealthy managers, unhealthy staff members who don't do it purposely, but because they have not invested in the self. So the next revolution is understanding that we have to shift the organizational climate. We have to invest in the wellness of the people in the organization. The cultures of gossip, of attacking each other, of pulling people down, the cultures of shaming people, of humiliating people have become common in our society, but they are worse since COVID, and they are represented in the workplace. So that is the next level in which you have to work in. You know, as an executive director, I have told donors, fortunately, I operate in a non-conflict sector. And I have over the years, and I've been really fortunate to have donors who understand this. I have told my donors that having a budget for self-care is a critical component. So all our projects have self-care as a critical component of the budget. And then I also have coaching for managers, because I tell them that it will be irresponsible of me as an executive director to place any person in a position of power and authority in a wounded context like the one that we have in South Africa, and not give them the tools to take care of themselves, because there is nothing as destructive as a wounded leader. So the implications is that in contexts like this, you can have a resilient leader who is driven by the vision, makes strategic decisions, is able to contain their own triggering, is not driven by emotional hijack. Or you can have wounded leadership, that where you find that the wound is the one that is leading the organization. They make wounded decisions. Sometimes you're like, but I don't know, this person makes this decision today, the next is, and there's no rationale behind their decision because they are driven by their wound and how they feel. So in contexts like this, part of the work then that needs to be done at a self level, and I want to appeal to you, if you have any position of influence, you have to deal with yourself, because otherwise in such a context, you are likely to be a wounded leader. My second and last slide. The implication, I think, then for you as risk mitigation practitioners, or whatever practitioners that you are, is that first of all, you have to understand that it is not going to be easy to operate in this context. I don't know how many brilliant, intelligent people have been broken because they will go, you go to a workplace, they interview you, they see your light, and then you expect that when you go in, they will clap hands at you, they'll see you. But when you go there, you feel like they are actually sucking the light out of you. But when you begin to appreciate that it is not personal, they are wounded, it's a wounded context, it is painful, I have to prioritize myself. It completely shifts and reframe the way in which you deal with these challenges. You also start personalizing things in your life. And because personalizing things that people do drains you emotionally. Also, you begin to understand that one of the biggest risks in wounded contexts like ours, which has been exacerbated by COVID-19, is chronic stress and burnout. And I think when you appreciate that it is hard to work in this context, then you are able to understand, sure, my reality check is I work with wounded people. I'm managed by wounded people. I'm helping wounded people. I think it is the most painful when you help people and they don't come back. It's not because they are difficult. It's not because they are evil. It's not because there's something, it's just because they are too broken to can see you and acknowledge you. When you begin to have this appreciation, then you understand that it is up to me. I am the master of my soul. I have to stop expecting people to give me validation, acknowledgement, and self-care, because even the people that we love are unable to give us that because they are too wounded or broken to do that. So begin to ask for help, reach out, counseling, supervision, get mentors, somebody who's done the work, is brilliant, not just technically, but also at an emotion, get an emotional intelligence coach to be mentor to help you, and also get coaching. So I just think in conclusion, I just want to reiterate that I know, and I just really believe that it is us. It is us. The universe decided that it is us that are going to usher our region into the next era. It is us that will help our region to deal with COVID-19. It is us. It is not by mistake that we are here. Our most important work is to take care of ourselves so that the darkness and the pain and the woundedness does not overwhelm our light, and be a bit more empathic and forgiving of the people around us, because most of them are too broken. And one thing that I know is that if just one person does the work, and Ubaba Madiba is an example of that. When one person has done the work, they revolutionize the environment around them, and they create a more supportive and caring organization. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nomfundo. Colleagues, we are drawing to the close of this presentation, of this session. Nomfundo, there are no specific questions on the chat group, but there is one interesting comment from Farai Mtuma, who says, I hope I am not wounded beyond treatment. What would your comment be to that, Nomfundo?
I mean, thank you for that, and thank you for all the feedback. I work in an organization where we've got the trauma clinic. We work with torture survivors. We work with people that have seen horrendous things. I mean, if we were to tell some of the stories, I wouldn't believe that, such pain actually exists. And I have been amazed at the capacity. In psychology, we call it elasticity, that brain has got amazing elasticity and the capacity to bounce back. It is never too late. And there is no human being that is broken beyond repair. The important thing is just to do the work and start doing the work. So please do, I will put some of my contact details here if you want to look at how to do this work for your organization or for yourself. It is never too late. And just being awake and just also a warning, when we become awake to ourselves and the importance of doing this work, usually then there's a lot of shame that comes with it. When you do this work and you become awake to the fact that you're wounded, exercise empathy for yourself, exercise care. The fact that you are even asking this question is so critical because it means that you are becoming awake to yourself. And let me tell you, we are dealing with intergenerational trauma. I say to people that when I deal with myself, I'm not just doing it for me as Nomfundo, I am doing for the next generation after me. Because when I'm wounded, I represent the wounding of my mother and my grandmother. So it's gonna be tough because we are the generation that must do this work for the next generation in Africa. And when I have done it as Nomfundo, things become easier for my daughter and my granddaughters, for my son. So it might be easy and it might be difficult. Do not give up. Do not give up. Just say that it begins with me to transform my clan, my society, my organization.
Thank you for that comprehensive response to the question. One more from Lubosi Kikamba. How do you make a balance between taking care of the self and collaboration? I take it is speaking to the balance between needing to take care of yourself and also work with others in the process.
Yeah. So most of the work that we do around emotional intelligence, actually we focus on four areas. The first two is, self-awareness and self-healing. And then the second one is about managing other people. So when we talk about self-care, it's not just, I'm selfishly looking at myself, but it's about saying that how do I ensure that when I enter into collaborative relationships, I don't enter with my toxicity and my woundedness, and I therefore make it difficult to collaborate. But also if I enter into collaboration with other people and they bring their own woundedness and toxicity, how do I then make sure that their woundedness does not trigger me and hinder me from being able to do the work? And the strategies, that you can be able to learn on how to do that. So collaboration and interpersonal relationships and working with yourself is not actually separate. It's actually both. It's yourself and the relationships that you are in.
Thank you very much. Participants, we are drawing to the end of a very powerful session today, where we've gone through quite a lot with Janice and with Doug and Caroline setting the tone, with Stan speaking to us about the benefits of the IRM qualifications, and keynote speakers, Professor Mtambara speaking to us about reimagining business, and Eusebius speaking to us about the role of the risk management profession, and followed by a panel discussion that touched the subject of hearing from other risk disciplines, chaired by Francis. Very important session that, after which we went into 4 breakaway streams, and we have just concluded a very powerful motivation discussion on managing self. As we round off, I would like to call upon Mrs. Margaret Mkurajija, the other co-host and chairperson of the Zimbabwe Regional Interest Group of the IRM, for her closing remarks. Margaret?
Thank you very much, Joe and Denise, for really taking care of everything in this session. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to be given an opportunity to officially close this conference on risk management, captioned Weathering the Perfect Storm, organized for Southern Africa by IRM UK, IRM South Africa, and Zimbabwe regional groups. The conference was themed around the risk profession in the next normal, as the professor has said. I'd like to express my deep thanks to our distinguished speakers for their efforts and readiness in sharing their knowledge and experiences with the participants. The benefits of the importance of risk management and the risk profession in the next normal that were shared with you during the training cannot be emphasized. The speeches delivered emphasized and gave us the importance of discussing effective approaches and methods on risk management during and post-COVID era. The presentations from the speakers gave us a clear picture on their respective own case studies and techniques, and we got brilliant ideas from them. We appreciate very much the knowledge shared by the panel of expert speakers, the information shared with us by our esteemed speakers is very relevant, and we thank you all for a job well done. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to IRM UK, South Africa, and Zimbabwe regional groups for organizing such an important conference, particularly at a time that the world at large is in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic and has flagged risk management as a high priority area, and also is demonstrated by the requirements set out by the Basel Committee and review of requirements after the economic meltdown and collapse of some companies. Let me now say congratulations to our participants for successfully attending the forum. This could have been a futile exercise without you, the participants. I thank you all for active participation and experience exchanges. As professionals, we should use the knowledge and experience shared by the speakers as an asset to our organizations. I wish all participants a successful implementation of lessons learned, and I have no doubt that you are going to be game changers and your teams are going to notice this and embrace your game-changing techniques. I trust we feel the wave of the change of the next normal across the Southern African region, not tomorrow, not in the future, but immediately. Overall, I'm very enthusiastic about the success that we have achieved from this conference. I truly hope that the organizers would consider arranging for another gathering of a bigger magnitude next year. With these few remarks, I declare the conference officially closed. I thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Margaret. Just to quickly chip in, even though you have declared the conference closed, I just wanted to thank everybody as well for joining. If you do have any specific comments, good or bad, can I suggest that you send me or Joe a direct message on the chat function in the next 10 minutes? So any of the sessions you particularly enjoyed, any areas where you think we can improve or do something different for the next time, please send Joe or myself a direct chat in the chat function. So I can't declare it closed again because Margaret has done that already, but I just wanted to thank everybody. If you do want any further information about IRM UK, it is available. Somebody's starting to share their screen. I'm not sure if that's intentional. Somebody muted me. I'm not sure who. Okay, all right. We're getting some last minute technical glitches here. I'm not sure who tried sharing their screen. I'm not aware of any other screens going up. So for now, I'd like to thank everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. We actually ended 10 minutes early, which is good. So you have 10 minutes extra in your day. I will stop talking now, and I'm going to just mute myself, put my video off, and then everybody can leave the meeting when they're ready. Thank you very much. I just want to quickly open the chat function so I can just share or read some of my chats. Okay, just the ones that were directly to me.
Maggie will be joining us shortly.
Okay.
So thank you. There was one directly to me. Denise, good session overall, but I felt some of the presentations were a bit rushed. We could have benefited from a bit more time. Maybe make it end at 4 p.m. next time while maintaining the same number of presenters. Okay, all the others are to everyone. Then there's a direct. Kindly share the presentations, and then she sent the email address. Joe, I'm not sure if you have any direct messages. Who's this lady?
No, I don't seem to have any. Or I'm missing them.
Okay. Okay.
Confirm there are none.
I'll put on my video since no one wants to share theirs. I'll put mine off. Okay, Sanela, do you want to say anything to wrap up? Or
Just wants to add the word of gratitude to the whole team. From the reviews that I'm seeing, everything went well except those small glitches, but nobody could see them. But at the end of the day, our conference went as planned. And thank you to the team that was running with the sessions, the streams. It went well. Even you as program directors, your work was so outstanding. So everything just flows. And people are happy with the discussions, are happy with the information that they are getting. So for me, it's for our first conference, it has gone well. And we are learning from it.
thanks. I see Tafira is also not on at the moment. Is he going to join?
To him.
Maybe not. Okay. Well, thanks,
Terence is
Anele.
also missing.
Can I just say on behalf of IRM in the UK, thank you so much to the whole committee for a very great job and all the efforts that you've put in. It was a really good conference, I can see from the feedback. We'll be sharing, we'll email everybody who registered for the event. So for those people who are happy to share their presentations, we can include all of them in the email that we send. I just thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. It was a very good conference.
Thanks, Juliet. I do have a combined set of slides with all the slides except the two speakers who didn't want to share their slides. So
Okay.
I'll just send that to you.
Okay.
I've pasted everything into one set.
Thanks.
But sorry, I don't have the stream ones though. Yeah, I'll send you the stream ones separate. Okay, I'll send you the stream ones and then the combined session ones.
Okay. Yeah, and so Rory will be sending an email out to all the registered, all the people who registered. And yeah, so that's fine. And then we'll record, since the session has been recorded, we'll also save that and add it to the website, put it on the website on the regional group pages. So both the Zimbabwe and South Africa regional group pages.
And please share the link to the attendees, because some of them were asking me whether are they going to get the recording.
Yeah, that can be done as well. So that can go in the same email that has the presentations. Yeah.
Yeah,
Juliet.
Yes.
Juliet,
Yes.
Towards the end of the session, we had a late discussion around feedback with Denise. Is there a standard way of getting feedback through your platform at IRM, or do we go with the chats that have been posted just at the close of the session?
We can also request feedback. So we have the Survey Monkey that we use for the groups. So if you have questions, then if you have any specific questions you'd like us to include, then we can do that for you. Or if you want to just have a standard sort of maybe rate the speakers, that sort of thing, we can just sort of make up one for you. But that's also possible.
My take off the cuff is that I think you do organize conferences regularly, and I think your standard, what you think is run of the mill, will probably do just as well if they're rating the speaker, rating the topics and time, and the quality of the platform and so forth. I think I would go with that.
Okay. That's fine. So all that will go in the email, hopefully, so probably before the end of this week. So the video will need a bit of editing just to remove any bits that look a bit strange, and then the survey will be prepared. And yeah, so the email should go out before the end of this week.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I suppose because we hadn't thought about it before, maybe by end of the week is still fine. But I think just in future when we organize, let's just make sure that those things then go out on the same day that we would have finished the conference, because by the end of the week people would have moved on.
Some of them can, for instance, the presentations, if we have them, we could send out. It's just that we wanted to send them in the same email. The thing is, things like editing the video are not going to, it's not something that's quick. So it's not something that can be done like immediately and finished at that very moment. So it just depends on, it's just because of all the things we want to include in the email.
Now I'm referring to the one that you are doing a survey on.
For the survey, yeah.
Yes, that's because the other things like the videos and stuff can always follow up later. But in terms of the survey itself, ideally you want it to go out as quickly as possible, preferably on the same day.
Yeah. We'd rather not send 2 emails. I'll speak to Rory and we'll just see how quickly we can do it. So we'll try. I'm saying by the end of this week, just not to over promise, but we'll try to do it as quickly as possible so that we send 1 email with everything. I'll just see if we can prioritize it to make sure that that goes out sooner rather than later. And noted for future events, for things like surveys going out on the same day.
Okay, great.
Other than